Welcome back to another FPL reaction stream, and this will form a double upload today because I did upload a latest draft podcast earlier for UCL Fantasy, and you will see my team selection tomorrow and yet another deadline stream on the Tuesday, but that'll be specifically for the Champions League, and I'll be answering those questions, of course, in that respective live stream. For today, I'll be focusing on Fantasy Premier League and talking about an eventful game week. It was all going so well until Man City beat Man United 3-0 and Erling Haaland scored a brace, because my green arrow was basically around 1 million, and now I've only gained 100,000 places, maybe 200,000. So Erling Haaland has been a thorn in my side for the last couple of weeks, and this is just another example. I started last season with him. I even triple captained him in Game Week 2, but that hasn't been the case this season, and Mohamed Salah salvaged a poor performance with a 95th minute penalty. But I have to say, in Game Week 6, the push from Salah towards Haaland will be very, very important. but also very popular. I don't think it's the time to do it in Game Week 5, just to offer my initial thoughts with Haaland facing Arsenal away and Salah facing Everton at home. I know the Toffees have been very impressive recently, and their record under David Moyes is nothing to be scoffed at, but I think Salah is worth keeping until Game Week 6. Then we could consider that sort of switch with 2 free transfers to Erling Haaland, and that's where we could triple captain him against Burnley at home. Let's get into your questions as always. Drop a like if you enjoy the content. Subscribe to my channel. We are closing in on 36,000, and I think by the end of the Tuesday, because a lot of people will tune in to that deadline stream, it is possible that we reach that goal this week. So let's make sure to make a big push towards those new objectives, and the same goes for my social media platforms like my Discord server, the FPL League, and all the other links like my Blue Sky, Instagram, and Patreon. Kevy says, Salah, Haaland returning hurt my score a lot. Still, Waldemar returning was nice. It's always very satisfying when a differential, and I think now his ownership is 1.3%, when he just returns, especially on his debut, and not many people are going for him in Fantasy Premier League, but that's always the risk when you don't go for Salah and Haaland. I'm not saying that you can't do it, because ultimately a lot of people will still be in a good position without those players, but there will be certain weeks where they both return massively. And of course, in the case of Salah, it was very fortuitous to say the least. I captained him myself. Erling Haaland's was maybe a little bit more predictable in terms of the performance. Man City were dominating that game and they thoroughly deserved the win. And I think it was just a matter of time before he scored. But with Salah, he just didn't look like scoring whatsoever, and ultimately it came down to a 95th minute penalty. Yeah, easy once again with the first and second team. I'm just saying there's going to be a lot of haters about that, and I personally don't like it too much myself, but everyone can play the game the way they want to, although I'm not sure if that's allowed in the rules, but let's keep it hush and whatever they want to say. First team 76 points, triple captain Salah successful. Just about. I still think Erling Haaland could easily outscore that in Game Week 6, and even this week, of course, he outscored Salah by 4 points, but the midfield advantage is always a massive thing. If they both score 2 goals, Salah will score more points. That's just how it's going to come down to. And it's a key reason why Salah has been so popular and also consistent over the years. I think that midfield advantage also helps a lot. My second team got 67 points with Haaland captain. It goes to show as well that even if you have one team with Salah, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to outperform a Haaland team, for example. But then again, the triple captaincy on Salah would probably have swayed things the other way. Good decision for me to triple captain Salah. I'm not so sure. I mean, ultimately he scored. His record against Burnley is quite poor. Before today, it was 1 goal and 2 assists in 10 matches. And I kept saying this throughout my content. And ultimately, look, a penalty's a penalty. It's like Bruno Fernandes last week or a couple of weeks ago before the international break. That is one of the main assets they have in terms of their FPL credentials. They can score a penalty and cover up a bad performance. But if I'm being completely honest, I think there'll be plenty of triple captaincies throughout the first half of the season that outscore 9 points, but it easily could have been 3. So with the way it happened, you'd ultimately be happy with it. I completely get it, but I don't think it's a great triple captaincy. I think it's kind of average overall. Yeah, team 1 is better. 2 teams not as fun in my opinion. Less risk, says Kevy. To be honest, I think having 1 team is already enough of a headache, and I even forgot to change my family members team, but I never have a second team myself. I think well, actually, people will be like, what about Club World Cup? So just to be clear about that, in the Club World Cup, I obviously had my team that I was talking about in all my content, but I also made a squad for the thumbnails, and obviously I described that in the moment, and somehow the thumbnail team outscored my own one, so maybe I'm a fraud. Man City are finished, speaking of frauds, says 82 points, glad I wildcarded Haaland in. But doesn't that go against your YouTube username? I mean, you could say Haaland's not finished and City are, but there we go. Bringing in Cole Palmer and letting go of Fernandes. I'm not so sure about that, and let's not forget that Cole Palmer scored his first open play goal in the Premier League since the 14th of January. Bruno Fernandes has scored plenty of goals in that time frame, and Palmer's minutes might still be managed because the priority will be to have him ready against Bayern Munich away in midweek. So would it surprise me to see him have his minutes managed against Man United or in future game weeks? Not so much, but ultimately, if Palmer's fit, he's going to start and play the vast majority of games for Chelsea. He's very important to them, and he's going to get plenty of goal contributions this season, but so will Bruno Fernandes. CN Fans Jersey says, got 67 points, am I cooked? Not necessarily. I think that's an okay score. Now, if you are at a higher rank at the moment, then it might result in a red arrow, but yeah, I think 67 is okay, especially if you don't have Erling Haaland. I'm wildcarding in Game Week 5. Yeah, look, I think ultimately it is team dependent. I don't know who you have, so it's difficult for me to say if it's the right course of action for your team. But yeah, I'm looking at Game Week 6 as a potential wildcard window, but I've always said this in my chip strategy guide from the beginning of the season. Game Week 13 is still an opportunity and possibility, but I think Game Week 8 is probably the most likely for my setup. Now, if, for example, I've got other files to put out, and it makes buying Erling Haaland in Game Week 6 a lot more difficult, and it results in 5-6 transfers needing to be made, in that sort of situation, I'd be open to wildcarding in Game Week 6, but I don't think it's worth changing everything up for Erling Haaland when he faces Arsenal away. I know he's fixture-proof, he scored against them last season, but they lost 5-1, and ultimately it was 6 points compared to what Salah could do against Everton. So my advice for those with Salah is to keep him for one more week at least, and then you can do that reshuffle and go to Erling Haaland in 6. And I got 68 points, so that's good. Yeah, I think so. It's all relative as well, but yeah, I think 67, 68 is fairly decent. Yeah, Man City are finished having Haaland is crazy. Yes, I agree. Really desperately need Semenyo and Haaland. Waiting just one more week. Plan is Salah and Watkins out for them. I actually talked about Semenyo a lot this week. I liked him as a long-term punt, but not so much against Brighton because over the last couple of years, the Seagulls have a great record against the Cherries, and Semenyo has never scored or assisted against Brighton until yesterday. He got that assist for a great Alex Scott goal outside the box, and then the penalty. So sometimes it needs some luck to go your way for a pick like even Semenyo, who is a very good option anyway, to get that massive haul. But ultimately, I think Semenyo has proven to be fixture-proof, and I don't mind buying him in against Newcastle. And spoiler alert, I might have done that already. Soccer Legendino says 55 points. Yeah, look, probably an average score, maybe a little bit below, depending on which rank you're at. But yeah, there's still plenty of time to regroup and also gain more understanding of the best teams and assets. It's always like this at the beginning part of the season. You could kind of say you've got a bit of a free hit and you just kind of roll with it. You learn more about these teams and then you can make informed decisions, which is why I don't like wildcarding so early on. It's very popular between Game Weeks 2 to 4, and I think a lot of people wildcarded this week, but I think it's better to do it later in the season. Yeah, 64 points. I'm seeing a lot of 50s and 60s in the chat, but there's probably going to be some 70s and 80s flying around as well. City says, was on a 24 red, but Haaland captain saved me. I'm still in the top million, thankfully. Yeah, look, for me it was the complete opposite. I did very well on the Saturday, or relatively well. And then, of course, on the Sunday, yeah, it all went horribly wrong for me in the Man City game. All I wanted was for Haaland to blank, but I'm asking for a lot. He was ranked second in my captaincy list, and I even said multiple times he could easily be number one over Salah, considering the Egyptians' record against Burnley. So fair play. At least you've maintained that rank, and that's a good position to be in at this stage of the season. Remember, there is ages of the season to go, only just started. Yeah, I think that's completely fair to say, and it's important to try to introduce a bit of logic and calmness to it. I know this is a reaction stream. We offer our hot takes and initial thoughts. Sometimes we say things that are very reactionary, so to speak, but yeah, it's good to be patient and give our assets time to breathe, but certain players like Ollie Watkins have to deliver very soon, otherwise they're out. Hi Dylan, sell Johnson or Watkins, or both for a -4. I'm still going to say Johnson. Now, I like the upcoming fixtures for Spurs, and if Johnson gets the minutes, he could definitely get returns against Brighton, Wolves and Leeds. My problem is that he's not going to start all those games, and I said this before Game Week 4, even though I was concerned about Xavi Simons starting the game, that he is my favourite option in that Tottenham attack in the long term. Then it will be Kudus simply because of the minutes and the creativity. And with Ollie Watkins, look, I completely get it. He's not worth the money right now. Aston Villa are the only team in England in the top 7 divisions to not score a goal. I mean, that's simply not good enough. They have to break that drought very soon. Otherwise, they're in big trouble. But I think they will do it over the coming weeks. And when it clicks, I think Villa will score plenty of goals, especially at home. But yeah, I think with Watkins, you keep him for the next 2 to 3 and then afterwards sell. Even if he shows a lot of promise and maybe Villa improve significantly, it's just a fixtures play to keep Ollie Watkins. If it wasn't for that, he would have been sold a week or 2 ago in my case. But I think in the midfield, you could argue there are fewer options actually that stand out. Bukayo Saka is currently injured. Maybe he's available for Man City, which I talked about in the last week or 2. The same goes for Saliba as well. Cole Palmer obviously made his return yesterday and scored. You've got Bruno Fernandes, who is still consistent, but he is playing very deep at times, which people always kind of mention. You've also got Semenyo, who for me is a standout option in the midfield. If you can go from Johnson to Semenyo, I'd 100% do it. Caicedo better than Reinders? Well, so far, yeah. And Caicedo's averaging 6.5 points per game. I will talk about him in my Transtats podcast. It might not be published tomorrow. I'll keep you updated and try my best to do that. But otherwise, it will be on the Wednesday because of the UCL fantasy content I'll be producing. But yeah, Caicedo is getting DEFCON every single game. I think the only match he didn't do it was against West Ham in a 5-1 win. But he scored anyway, so he's getting some massive returns, and he's one of the best defensive midfielders in world football. So yeah, Caicedo is now even more appealing as an FPL asset with DEFCON being implemented. Yeah, 90 points with a free hit, that's what I mean. There will be some high scores flying around, but yeah, with a free hit as well, that's mightily impressive. I'm just wondering who you had in your squad. And generational 100-point wildcard. I mean, that's an incredible score, an immediate impact. But I also think the wildcard is a long-term tool. So if it can hold up and be consistent, then I think that's a great use of the wildcard. It is early days, but so far it is looking great. Yeah, same here, Twisted Parky. It seems to get more difficult every single season, right? And despite having the last two campaigns were the worst for me in FPL, I still started very strongly, actually. I was around 200,000 at this stage last season. So I need to build some momentum, but ultimately, it needs a reshuffle in certain areas. You know, my back four delivered this week. I also had Salah with a fortuitous return in Daigot DEFCON, but the rest is kind of underwhelming or average. So, yeah, I need to sort out those midfielders. Semenyo is the priority. He has to be brought in for me. And Ollie Watkins, he just can't continue like this. Well, it can. Well, no, not for me. He needs to go if he continues this way. But I will keep him for the Sunderland game. Then I'll reassess it. But yeah, the Stadium of Light won't be easy for Aston Villa, so let's see if that Sunderland away fixture proves to be fruitful for Watkins and co. He's up there easy. FPL-wise, he's certainly one of the frauds of the season, but I don't think it's a terrible decision. I'm still going to maintain that. Let's not forget how in form he was in pre-season, and he also has been very consistent over the last couple of years. He's outscored Erling Haaland, actually, over the last 3 seasons in terms of FPL points, I believe. So, yeah, maybe not last 3, last 2 seasons, but still, I think Watkins is very consistent. He just hasn't been able to get the service, and Villa have really struggled creatively and to link up in the attack. Yeah, I think with Caicedo, like I said before, with the goals, I think they will dry up, to be honest. It's like a purple patch he's got in the Premier League. He was sent off for Ecuador against Argentina. Obviously, that has no bearing in FPL, but he does have those yellow cards and occasional reds in him, and I think that could be costly, but as an FPL asset right now, he's going to go up in price to 5.6 million at some stage. He's going to get DEFCON in most matches. And to be honest, if I was wildcarding, I'd seriously consider bringing him in over Reinders, for example. I think that's a great shout. What should I do with Rutter? I can bench him, but I feel like he weakens my bench boost. Well, if he gets the nod against Tottenham Hotspur, he could definitely score in that fixture. And he could even be on penalties. Brighton love to share that duty around, to be fair. It all depends on who's on the pitch. But yeah, Jorginho Rutter hasn't been as impressive as I thought he'd be in the opening stages of this season. The problem I have is, at a similar price, there aren't too many that stand out. Probably Moises Caicedo and Antoine Semenyo are the ones I really look at. Weiseng says 72 points all out, only sells Gakpo, Rodgers and Watkins blanked. Yeah, that's good. I mean, the sign of a good team is when most of your players return. You've only got a few blankers in there, and that's a solid score this week. 80 points without any chip. Yeah, that's even better there. Surely time to sell Rodgers and Watkins. Well, I said this before. If you've got a double up, I would trim it down, and Rodgers is the one I'd rather sell because you can go to Semenyo for a similar price. And I think with Watkins, he's more likely to score or assist than Rodgers at this moment in time. But Villa in general look terrible. And the other side of the argument is that Ollie Watkins is more expensive and you've got more options in the forward line to choose from. So I can understand both arguments, but in terms of what I've seen so far, I think Rodgers has been even worse, but ultimately they have the same amount of points basically. Kevy says, I get you, bro. I plan on bringing in Haaland after Gameweek 5. Possible free hit 6, wildcard 7. Any thoughts? Yeah, even a free hit in 5 could be quite underrated, to be fair. It all depends on your team structure and what fires you have to put out. So timing can be very important, but yeah, in my case, the wild card in 8 is the most likely. If I were to do it a bit earlier, I think Gameweek 6 is the most likely. But yeah, with a free hit, there are multiple Gameweeks where that could be very appealing. For some people, it was the case in Gameweek 4 or even in Gameweek 2. So it all depends on how you've set up from the beginning of the season. Twisted Parky puts his squad. Time to wildcard. Look, you've got Sells against Burnley and Sunderland over the next two, so I don't think that's a must-sell right now. Maybe in Game Week 7, that could be the case. Your defensive line is solid. Borderell, Munoz and Cucurella, you could easily start them in Game Week 5 and be quite happy with their returns. Cucurella against Man United away, maybe not the best on paper, but Chelsea would be the favourites in that match. With the midfield, Wirtz has been terrible. I thought he'd step up today, but it was a really poor performance, arguably worse than the other Premier League games he's had so far. Reinders, great Game Week 1 performance against Wolves, but maybe Wolves are that bad. They're bottom of the league after all. I still think he's going to be a decent asset long term, but he's going to pale in comparison to Caicedo based on how things are going. Salah is still fine. I'd rather have him than Haaland for this week. Then it will change in Game Week 6. Watkins, Mateta, they're good options against West Ham and Sunderland. I know they've been very poor so far this season. And Bruno Fernandes against Chelsea, yeah, I still like him. So, to be honest, I don't think you have to wildcard. I understand why you're thinking that way. A lot of them underperformed in Game Week 4 and some of them in weeks prior, but I think you don't need to wildcard just yet. Maybe Game Week 6 could be even better. Ahmed says, have one free transfer, free hit in Game Week 6. Do I roll or replace Wirtz? Kind of done with him. I get that, and maybe I was wrong about Wirtz. I thought he would bounce back before the Arsenal game where he played relatively well but didn't score or assist. And against Burnley, I mean, Liverpool in general were quite underwhelming. They deserved to win the match, but obviously they left it late. Yeah, you already have Semenyo. This is what I mean, though, about the midfield. Apart from him, Salah, Palmer, Saka when he's back, how many players will be reliable in the midfield? Bruno Fernandes? Then I kind of struggle. Caicedo, arguably. He's offering insane value. I could see him being priced at 7 million next season if he continues this way. But yeah, I'm looking at it and I think there aren't too many standout midfielders right now. We'll probably have a clearer picture in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, I think with Wirtz, I'd keep him for the Everton game and then look to sell in Game Week 6. Wei Seng says, Sells, Williams, Rodgers, Palmer, Watkins, to Petrovic, Richards, Paqueta, Xavi Simons, Haaland in Game Week 6. Yeah, I like the look of the transfers. I mean, you are selling some quality players, though. And I said this before. Sells has Burnley and Sunderland over the next two. And you're talking about doing this in Game Week 6. I'm guessing Sells to Petrovic funds the other moves, and Bournemouth look better this season than Forest, especially defensively. But would you really sell a Forest defender or Sells in goal when they're facing Sunderland at home? That could be a goalless draw, like it was between Sunderland and Crystal Palace yesterday. So I'm not so sure about selling Sells. And I always say this, I try to avoid goalkeeper transfers if possible. Then you've got Rodgers as well and Watkins with decent fixtures, but ultimately they've been poor. I get why you want to sell them. But yeah, selling Sells and Williams when they face Sunderland at home, I'm not so sure about that, to be honest. Even Palmer, yeah, it's kind of tricky for me. Ultimately, I like Erling Haaland. That could justify the transfers alone. But then you're looking at Richards, Paqueta, Xavi Simons. They're all good options, especially Simons. But yeah, I'm not so sure about that, mate. I'd find another way. Hopefully Elliott starts next game week and Watkins does something. Otherwise, his tenure in my team is over. Yeah, that's the hope, that Aston Villa make another tweak and find that formula to score goals and create chances. But it just hasn't been good enough. I mean, I don't think anybody expected Villa to not have scored this season. They're the only team in England's top 7 divisions, and Watkins hasn't had a kick in a lot of these matches. GV says, newly promoted teams at home are not easy to beat. Low block by Burnley, but Man United tried to attack, and this helped Haaland. Against Burnley, Haaland in Game Week 7 will be finding it difficult to score. I think that fixture is in Game Week 6, by the way, when Man City face Burnley, but you are right to a certain extent. I think the newly promoted teams this season seem much better. Even Leeds, they're struggling to score goals, but they can be quite compact defensively. They were unfortunate to lose against Fulham yesterday, but I think Man City will do better against Burnley at home compared to Liverpool as they did today. Now, I thought Liverpool would win comfortably today, but I got that prediction quite off the mark. In the end, they only won 1-0, but I think Man City can still score 3 or more past Burnley, and Haaland has scored hat-tricks against them in the past, while Salah's record against them is quite poor historically, which I've talked about many times. So I think it's also dependent on the kind of matchups and the tactics employed, and I think City could still batter Burnley in a couple of weeks' time. Sato puts his team 1.2 in the bank, 1 free transfer. What should I do? Johnson, Wood, Wirtz, Mateta flops. Yeah, but I wouldn't sell Wood and Mateta against West Ham away. I think that's fine. So if I'm looking at your team, Johnson is a very difficult one to say because I think if he starts two of the next three, he can score 2 goals and you can be very happy with that sort of return. But is that going to be the case? It's not a guarantee. I think Brennan Johnson probably starts one of the next three, and that might not be enough for you. Can he score off the bench? He definitely can, but yeah, that's a bit of a tricky one. I mean, Matoma, you didn't mention him as a flop, of course, and by the way, I talked about him in my free hit video. Great record against Bournemouth. That's now 5 and 6 against them, so I think that was a successful pick on the free hit. But yeah, with your team, I think Johnson is probably the biggest priority. If you can stretch to Semenyo, I would highly recommend that long term. Brighton have been disappointing. I think in the case of the Seagulls, they're going to be very difficult to predict. They always are. They beat Man City, then they lose to Bournemouth. And of course, the Cherries are a good team now. No disrespect to them, but Brighton won't really feel you with that confidence and consistency. I think that's what's lacking for them in order to qualify for Europe. Aston Villa is the only team in the entire English league not scoring. Well, look, they were scoring goals in pre-season, but they did lose a lot of games, and defensively they look shaky. So in this Premier League season so far, they aren't conceding too many, but they're not scoring at all. So that is a major concern. The creativity isn't there. I think it comes down to balance and having a fixed starting 11. They've had a lot of injuries, Kamara and Onana. That kind of unsettles the midfield. And I think someone like Harvey Elliott could be very important. I think he'll start in Game Week 5 now, but that isn't a guarantee, to be fair. Would you get Haaland or Salah on a wild card? Look, long term, I'm going to say Haaland. And I was going to make a updated wildcard video, but to be honest with you, I had so much content to do, like the predicted lineups, the UCL fantasy stuff. And in that wildcard team, I had Haaland and no Salah. So I wanted to show kind of both sides of it. And even in previous wildcard editions, which you can see on my channel, I've had Haaland in most of them. So for Game Week 5 specifically, I think Salah outscores Haaland. But long term, it's going to be the Norwegian robot all day long. Welcome, Barif. Good to see you. And that's a good rank, Madrid. In fact, that's a very good one at this stage of the season at 150k. Keep it going. Sazad says 81 points in free hit, total 236. Yeah, that's good stuff. A successful free hit, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not sure what your original team would have scored, but if you gain points from it, then that's the best play. Is bench boost worth it with Rutter, double Burnley defense, and Murillo? Well, Murillo is a doubt. He might not even start that game. Postecoglou described it as a knock, but he said he has to speak with the medical staff, and then he will see the reports and whether they can start him or not. But if Murillo is a doubt still, I would completely avoid that bench boost. And I think one game week for a lot of people, maybe not necessarily for you, which could be quite decent for the bench boost, is actually in Game Week 8. But yeah, at the moment, I'd say no. Eddie Cassie says, hi Dylan, I got 60 points, just a green arrow. Should I wildcard? Got a lot of poor players. Sells, Munoz, Lacroix, Consa, Salah, Fernandez, Reinders, Semenyo, Dewsbury Hall, Watkins, Mateta, with Dubravka, 8 Nuri, Wood, Estev on the bench. I don't think that's worth wildcarding just yet. Now, in a couple of weeks' time, I'd probably say, yeah, you could wildcard in Game Week 7 or 8, but for this week, you've got Chris Wood and Sells against Burnley. I think that's a very good fixture on paper. Forest have struggled against them historically, so maybe we could see an upset, but I still think on paper they would be the favourites, and Chris Wood can score goals. In fact, he scored a brace against them in his last meeting, and Matt Sells can keep a clean sheet. So I don't think that's worth wildcarding just yet, Eddie. I'd probably save it for Game Week 6 or later, like Game Week 8, for example. Mick says 69 points by Caicedo on the bench. That's one of the issues I would have with players like Caicedo because of the price tag and the reputation of being a defensive midfielder. And look, he's not going to score that many goals, as I said before. That will dry up very soon. But you will have this sort of mentality sometimes that I'm going to bench him for a more attacking player, like Ndai, as one example, and then Caicedo outscores him. That's going to happen from time to time, but sometimes you will have that sort of squad depth coming clutch, where someone misses out through injury or suspension, Caicedo comes on, and you get those extra points. Baraf says 64, decent score overall. Roku says could have been on 95 if I hadn't benched Van der Ven for Tosin. Yeah, but who would have expected Van der Ven to score and get 14 points? Not me, that's for sure. He has been a very good pickup so far, and whilst I gained a lot of points from going for Gakpo over Wirtz, part of that decision-making in Game Week 1 was going for Borro over Van der Ven. So I'd still be on the positive end of it, but Van der Ven has been the clearly better pick so far this season over Borro. He also saves you 1 million in the process. But my concern with Van de Ven has always been the injury record, and that could be what stops him from being a great FPL asset in a couple of weeks' time. Welcome, Beardy. Good to see you. The Caicedo red card versus Argentina was complete BS. Yeah, I agree. I don't think it was a red card. The referee is terrible, by the way. But yeah, the less said about him, the better. Haaland saved my ass. Yeah. He maybe not kicked my ass. He kicked my FPL team's ass. That was a bit frustrating, but at least I salvaged the green arrow in the end. Villa might get relegated. I think they'll be fine. It's just a really poor start to the season. They'll get things going. And let's not forget, they lost 3-0 against Crystal Palace, but before that, their last loss at Villa Park was in Gameweek 2 last season against Arsenal, so they'll be completely fine. Maybe they won't qualify for Europe. If they continue this way, they certainly won't, but there's no chance they'll be relegated, in my opinion. I think Wolves are the one I'd be really concerned about. Aki Code says 89 points after a -8 this week. Best players for me, Van de Ven and Haaland captain. Also, how did you get your updated rank? The website livefpl.net. It is approximate, so by the time FPL update the points, which will be around midnight in a couple of hours' time, when I say midnight, by the way, it's in the UK, basically I will be a few spaces or spots above my current rank that you see on screen. I'm not sure why it does it, but yeah, it's only going to be a few places, give or take. Is 81 points good for a free hit? Yeah, I think so, but it also depends on what you would have scored with your original team. If you gained, let's say, 15, 20 points, then that's decent. If you gain more than that, I think that's a great free hit. Sell Ekitike for Gyökeres. Well, Gyökeres scored a hat-trick against City last season, but they were very impressive today against Man United. I think that could be lower scoring based on what I kind of envision right now. It was 5-1 for Arsenal last season, but yeah, that's a difficult game to predict. Arsenal would be the favourites still because they've got the better defence, but if City find that winning formula, they will compete for the title as well. I'd keep Ekitike for now. I mean, Isak wasn't even on the bench, and he's going to be eased into it, as Arne Slot said. So I'd keep Ekitike for now, and maybe switch him to Gyökeres in Game Week 7 or 8. Dryhill says Wirtz, Rodgers to Semenyo, 1.7 in the bank. Difficult to say. They've both been atrocious, but I would probably buy Semenyo for probably Florian Wirtz. I mean, he's going to score eventually, and he's going to burn a lot of sellers. I mean, I'm just saying that now. It's FPL heritage. So if you look at Game Week 5 specifically, maybe Wirtz is slightly better than Rodgers, actually. But there's also a 1.4 million difference in price. So it depends on what you can do with that budget. Ultimately, especially if you have Watkins as well, my advice is to sell Rodgers this week to Semenyo and then sell Wirtz in the coming weeks. Maybe use him as a sacrifice. Go to Caicedo, for example, and use those funds to buy Erling Haaland up front. That's just one idea, but I don't know your team, of course. Bringing Grealish in place of Bruno and Watkins to Haaland in Game Week 6. Look, Grealish blanked yesterday, but he played very well again. He created some big chances, and he won the Premier League Player of the Month award for a reason. Whilst I prefer Ndai long term, and I said this before Game Week 4 even began, I think Grealish is still a decent pick. I talked about skipping him though, going into Game Week 4. I felt he would blank against Villa and Liverpool coming up next. But yeah, it's a good question. I'd probably say yes, because you're buying Erling Haaland. It's as simple as that. If you can afford Semenyo, I'd highly recommend doing that instead. I think he's the better pick long term. Already had Haaland, so he would have still been around 70 points, says Miro. Yeah, but you gain points at least. It's a decent free hit in the end. What's your plan with Chris Wood? To keep him and start against Burnley and Sunderland and then probably sell, but I've got other buys to put out. As you can see, Ismail Assar is red flagged. I've got 0.9 million in the bank, by the way, or more than that. You can see it on screen. Yeah, following that Lacroix transfer, who replaced Murillo, I gained 3 points from it, and I also gained, I think, 0.5 extra. So, yeah, I've got 0.3 million in the bank, and that's because, just for those that are unaware, and I did say this earlier in the stream, or I hinted at it, I have made the transfer already. I have sold Ismail Assar, so that's why I've only got 0.3 in the bank. So, yeah, that is one of the key reasons why I bought the Frenchman in the defence. Foden is back with DEFCON. Bro is insane. Look, Foden has a lot of talent, but let's not forget he's been poor for over a year now. I think it's about time that he steps up for City and he's consistent for them because they need him to be at his best to compete for the title. But yeah, as an FPL asset, he's got a good record against Man United. He's getting DEFCON as well in this fixture. That's very impressive, but he's not going to get it too often, in my opinion. Salah wins again over Haaland on expected minutes. Yeah, but of course, last season, Salah absolutely trumped Erling Haaland. And yeah, the play last season, if you look at it, was to go for Haaland for the first 5 game weeks and then swap to Salah in game week 6. Yeah, or if you can, go for both of them. As for this season, it might be the opposite, actually, where, well, maybe not start with Salah. It just looks like Erling Haaland from the beginning. So every season is different. It looks like the Norwegian robot is the go-to asset, but things can change very quickly. Mick DC says, I think running 4 or 5 guaranteed DEFCON winners could get or net a good chunk of points over the whole season. It's just having the faith to keep them in the squad, even if they blank a couple of weeks. That's one of the key reasons why I bought Lacroix. He didn't get DEFCON against Sunderland, but he's going to get them very often. Caicedo in the midfield would be another one who kind of classifies for this, even though you're specifically talking about defenders. And yeah, that's definitely a viable strategy, to be fair. Now, that could also mean avoiding Van de Ven and Borro, because they're not going to get DEFCON as often as a Collins or Lacroix and these sorts of players. Even Gabriel and Van Dijk are not going to get DEFCON as often as you would like, but they're still worth that premium price tag because you're investing in the best defences in the league. Wetbread says, Sunderland looking strong. I will bench Watkins versus Sunderland, and if he performs, I'll keep him. Otherwise, I sell. I mean, you're probably making another transfer or rolling, and I don't know your team, so it's unfair to comment properly, but if you're benching Watkins against Sunderland away, I think you should sell him right now. That's the way I feel. And I do agree, by the way, the Black Cats are looking very strong at the moment, and I'm surprised because, look, last season, their record in the Championship wasn't great. In pre-season as well, they were losing virtually every single game, but they've made so much investment and they've signed some quality players like Xhaka, and that has transformed them from a guaranteed relegation candidate to a possible mid-table team, or even better. I mean, it's early days. I think they will have a drop-off, but to get a point against Crystal Palace away, keep a clean sheet, and to win 2 games out of 2 at home, it's very impressive. What to do with Chris Wood and Bowen? I'd hold Chris Wood for sure, and I talked about this in my Game Week 4 transfer tips. He might be discussed again for the upcoming edition. As for Bowen, I'd be more open to selling him, but even in fixtures like Arsenal in Game Week 7, he has a good record against the Gunners, and he scored the winning goal last season at the Emirates. I don't think he'll do it this time, and I hope he doesn't, but he does have that ability. He is one of the best wingers outside the top 6. Twisted Parky says, would you bring in Semenyo for Wirtz then for a -4, for Haaland in Game Week 6, or Semenyo for Salah, then Haaland for Mateta or Watkins? Difficult one, but I think Wirtz out for Semenyo for a -4 long-term is the best play. I think that's the way I feel. So the Wirtz will be free transfers or 2 for Semenyo and Haaland if selling Salah. Yeah, I get that. Selling Salah or Haaland for the other is obviously going to help you a little bit in terms of the number of transfers necessary to make that sort of squad structure shift. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm still going to say sell Wirtz instead. Yeah, Richard with 98 points. That's the best I've seen in the chat. But there might be someone with 100. Actually, there might have been someone who said 100. Yeah, I think on the wildcard. So those two are leading. Sunderland is not an easy team to beat. They are the best promoted team in terms of performance. So far, yes, and the Premier League table suggests that. But like I said, it's very early days. We can't judge too much from 4 game weeks of the season. 320k rank with no Salah or Haaland, but how long can I go without a consistent captaincy choice? Well, as long as you keep nailing on the captaincy, you'll be fine, but that's the main issue when you don't have these big hitters who deliver in most given game weeks. Salah played poorly, still gets a penalty and scores the winning goal, just like Bruno Fernandes a couple of weeks ago. Erling Haaland will have stinkers, but still score a brace or a hat-trick. It's just how it is, but yeah, it could be a concern in certain game weeks. Even Game Week 4 was obviously a little bit rough for non-Salah and Haaland owners, but you're still in a very good position. Dear Dylan, what is this, a letter? Rodgers and Watkins, please talk me out of wildcard and hits. Well, to be honest, Gunnar, I don't know your team, but in most situations that I've seen in the live chat, I think a lot of people are well set up for Game Week 5, but because their assets have underperformed, they're just thinking, oh, I need to get in the players who are getting points right now and, shift everything, change absolutely everything in my team. That's not always the way to play FPL. And there's also more fixture swings to think about in Game Week 7 for Arsenal, for example. If you wildcard now, you might go without any Arsenal players, but you also have to think about future Game Weeks as well and the long term, not just Game Week 5. So I think in certain cases, it's probably best not to wildcard and wait for more information. Ultimately, with Rodgers and Watkins, I don't think selling one of them is a bad idea, and Sunderland could win that game, to be quite honest with you. But Villa have to step up at some stage. They've still got some good players. Watkins is one of them. Of course, Rodgers is also very promising. So, yeah, I think you don't need to wildcard, even with players like this who have been so poor so far this season. Have Rodgers, Watkins, and don't have Semenyo. Have 2 -4 to do it currently. Should I just wildcard? How would that work, though? So, who are you selling for Semenyo? Is it Rodgers? And what's the other transfer to make it a -4 hit? Depending on what that is, I'd rather take the -4 than wildcard. Should I be worried about Johnson's minutes? Yes, and I was asked this in the deadline stream, I believe, and I said the same thing. Johnson's not going to start regularly. I like the fixtures, and profile-wise, I think he can do very well against Leeds, Brighton, and Wolves over the next 3. Obviously, the Seagulls are up next, but yeah, I think with Johnson, the big concern will be the minutes. You are not serious, Watkins and Rodgers, that's a joke. I'm not sure if you're referring to the other questions or my personal views. I'm not saying they should be bought. In fact, I've been saying the opposite for the last couple of weeks. I mean, you don't invest in a team that are not scoring any goals whatsoever. But Watkins is not suddenly a bum. He hasn't forgot how to play football. He just needs the service. And I think Aston Villa can still click. But right now, if you're making a prediction, you're going to be favouring Sunderland in that game. But it's only 4 games in the season, and I still think Villa will finish above them in the Premier League table and score more goals. It's very early days after all. What's with Elanga being benched 2 games in a row? Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. When I saw the rumours before the Wolves game in Game Week 3, I was very perplexed by it. Actually, sorry, what am I saying? That was before the Leeds game in Game Week 3. I'm getting the fixtures mixed up. Yeah, and also we saw Harvey Barnes benched in that same fixture. Obviously, he started yesterday whilst Elanga was benched again. But Jacob Murphy got the assist, and I just don't see him being benched now. I think Murphy is currently first choice, and Elanga might be used as a super sub, as he sometimes was for Forest when he first began. Rockupus' wildcard team. I like the look of it. A lot of those players are talked about in my recent wildcard videos, and some of them will be discussed in future editions as well. You found a way to have Salah and Haaland. I don't think Kudus will score many goals, but he does have the fixtures. Antoine Semenyo is a brilliant option. Josh King at 4.5 continues to start, and his potential is very high, and your defensive line looks very solid overall. I would have some slight concerns about Tosin long term, but if he continues to start at 4.5, he's absolutely fine. And David Raya is a send-forget option until your next wildcard in the second half of the season. But yeah, Gyökeres is good. Joao Pedro, Haaland, of course. I just have slight concerns about the midfield, perhaps, with Kudus and maybe King, actually. Don't you have Reed there as well? Reed is the worst pick of the lot, I think. Yeah, that is the one that lets it down. If you can buy Caicedo, I would highly recommend that. How would you make that work? Interesting one. You got Van der Ven as well. Yeah, that's fine. Not a big fan of him still, but he has been performing. Yeah, Richards or Gay is close. Maybe Richards will get more Defcom. But maybe for the short term, you could do something like Gyökeres to Wood and really go for those next 2 fixtures and have that money for Caicedo in for Reed. The problem would be to get Gyökeres back or have him in time for Game Week 7. But look, I like your wildcard squad. It's very good for the most part, but Reed is not a good pick in my opinion. Yeah, dear Dylan, I'm not sure what was happening there. Sell Watkins. I get it. I'm not saying Watkins has to be kept, otherwise you're going to be burnt, because he's been so terrible so far. If he scores a brace, it still doesn't make up for the poor performances and the constant blanks in the first 4 game weeks of the season. But yeah, I think with Watkins, I'm still going to keep him. You see with my team, for example, Ismail Assar is the priority sell. I can also go to Semenyo. That is the one I'm doing. So yeah, in my case, I'm happy to keep Watkins for 1 more week, but he has been a massive disappointment. Bench boost, Salah, Haaland draft, finally a good week. Yeah, nicely done. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure who you had on your bench boost, but fair play. What about Gakpo? Still a good choice. I think he'll still start most games for Liverpool, but once Isak comes into the equation, one of Ekitike or Gakpo will drop out in certain matches. I think Ekitike is more at risk, but Gakpo will still have his minutes reduced, I think, a little bit, but he's still one of the best Liverpool options overall. No worries, Eddie. Pratik says, do you think I need to wildcard and get Palmer, Haaland, Gakpo in for Salah, Watkins, Wirtz? No, not in Gameweek 5 because I think Salah outscores Haaland. Let's not forget, City are facing Arsenal away. They lost 5-1 last season. Hopefully it happens again. Cole Palmer scored his first open play goal in the Premier League since the 14th of January. So he's going to be a great option this season, but let's not forget how poor he has been for many months. And Cody Gakpo is solid. I like him still as a pick. And he's an upgrade on Wirtz, and you save money in the process. But yeah, to be honest, in Gameweek 5, I'd keep Salah and Watkins for now. Make those moves in Gameweek 6, arguably. That's my advice. Kyle says, I'm on 68 points with my captain getting 2 and Anderson on the bench. If you're on about Elliot Anderson, he got DEFCON for the first time, but it's only 4 points. It's not like you're benching Caicedo, who got 12 with a goal as well. Dubravka versus Forest or Sanchez versus United. I've got the same dilemma. I'll talk about this in my team selection video. At the moment, I'm leaning towards Robert Sanchez, but that could easily change. And Dubravka was so close to keeping a clean sheet against the Premier League champions, but that penalty changed things in the end. Hey Dylan, seems like Salah isn't a banker captain anymore. Liverpool ain't clicking and Salah out of form. Yet they're still top of the table. Salah's returning 3 out of 4 games. So yeah, it could be worse, right? But I get your point. You are right. I think Liverpool still have levels to reach. And I think Isak being integrated will only help them in terms of depth and quality. But yeah, right now the go-to captain is Haaland. Apart from Gameweek 5, where I think he might be ranked a little bit lower than usual, he's going to be top of my captaincy list in many Game Weeks, Erling Haaland. And Salah will be a little bit lower than what we saw last season. Is Kluivert better than Semenyo long-term? No. I mean, Semenyo is clearly the talisman right now. If Kluivert begins to start again, he could be back on penalties, which would make Semenyo a little bit less appealing, but you're going to get more assists from Semenyo. He's also more nailed on right now. Kluivert has to break into that Bournemouth team, and that's not a guarantee at the moment, so in my opinion, that's a no. Semenyo is the best midfielder, apart from the obvious Salahs, Sakas, and Palmers in the world, once they're all fully fit and available, of course. Dan the Man says, I've got good players on paper and ranked 8 million. What do I do? I completely get that, and I'm also not satisfied with my start to the season, but look, it's going to be difficult for me to just say, yeah, just stay patient, give them time, because ultimately you want to react and be proactive and make some big strides in terms of rank. I don't know which players you've got. I think some of them might be clear sells, but it's very difficult for me to say without knowing your team. But the most important thing is not to panic and to reassess things and maybe have some creative ideas and solutions. For example, you might have a midfielder out like Ismail Assar, which is what I had going into Gameweek 4. Instead of just replacing him directly, maybe the best course of action in your team is to replace a forward instead or a defender, and that gives you more money to then upgrade your midfield in a better way. So to kind of quote an example, going into Gameweek 4, I bought Lacroix in for Murillo. That gave me an extra 0.5 million, and now I've got enough money to do Sarr to Semenyo. So I think that could also be a creative way of approaching the problems you're having right now. Kevy says, would you consider playing Dubravka or Estev next game week? They're against Forest at home, who have been struggling in the attack. Well, yeah, you're right. In the last 3 games, they've scored 1 goal. It is a new manager, and I think Ange will try to implement his ideas as soon as possible. That's what you kind of gathered from his press conference, and I think they will create chances and score goals, but they were up against, in my opinion, the best defence in the league in Arsenal, and it was always going to be a tough test for them. But yeah, in my opinion, it could be worth starting one of them. I wouldn't double up though, and I think Forest will still score. I mentioned this earlier in the stream. Burnley have a good record against Forest, and maybe they can get a result. They were so close today against Liverpool to get a draw. That would have been very impressive, to say the least. So that could be another low-scoring game, and that would favour the likes of Dubravka and Estev, but I wouldn't double up this week. Got 80 points, really happy. 67 is good. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, 80 is very strong in my opinion. I'm seeing some 80s, 90s, 100s flying around, but for the most part, I'm seeing 60s and 70s. It's all relative, but there's going to be a clear shift now towards Erling Haaland. my advice, as I've said throughout the stream, is to do that in Gameweek 6, not in Gameweek 5. So thank you to everyone who has been tuning in. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Let's get this to over 200 likes overall. And if we hit our super chat goal, I'll be live for even longer. But the plan is to record a transfer tips video over the coming days. And there will also be a wildcard squad, a team selection. And let me know if you want to see something else in FPL. If it's possible, I'll try to do something like a free hit squad. Predicted lineups is a possibility, but like I said, maintaining that with UCL Fantasy content will be difficult throughout the season. And of course, the latest draft was uploaded today, so this is a double upload, of course, with this reaction stream. But with the UCL Fantasy, you've got multiple drafts there with different structures and chip strategies. And speaking of which, I made a guide on the best time to use the wildcard and Limitless in UCL Fantasy. That was released on Friday, so be sure to check that out as well. And on Tuesday, I'll be going live for the first time in UCL Fantasy this season, and that's going to have insane numbers, as we always do in the Champions League. So our aim will be to get to 36,000 subscribers this week, and then push on towards 40,000 by the end of the season. So subscribe, share, comment, all that good stuff. It all helps us in the algorithm. And check the links in the description. Join my Discord server, the FPL League, and Spotify. It's all greatly appreciated. And now let's answer even more questions. In a few minutes, I'll probably show you some different screens like the FDR, the fixture difficulty rating, and also my FPL challenge team, which did very well this week. And Erling Haaland alone got over half of my points. Wei Seng says, I have so many transfers and 4 Chelsea in my hand. I need to find a way to settle it. Yeah, so you've talked about having Guiu and Palmer, right? Amongst 2 other Chelsea assets. And you were talking about selling Palmer. I mean, selling Palmer will be easier than selling Guiu because of the budget, obviously. But if possible, I'd rather sell Guiu. What I saw in Villa's first game was enough for me to sell Tielemans, but I have not had the transfers to remove Watkins plus wanted 1 return. Will we be surprised if very little versus Sunderland? At this stage, no, because Aston Villa have been so poor. But I'll be honest, I never ever thought Villa would have 0 goals after 4 games. I would have thought minimum 5. So yeah, it's a real big concern. They need to fix things very soon. It's reminding me a little bit of Emery's last season with Arsenal, where he was sacked in November. I'm not saying he's going to get sacked. I think he will turn things around. He's a top quality coach, but there are kind of snippets about that. Maybe the biggest difference actually is that Arsenal was so bad defensively, whilst Villa are looking quite strong, but they're conceding, they're not scoring enough or creating enough chances. But yeah, I think with Watkins, the fixtures play is to hold him for the next 2 or 3 and then sell. But sometimes form is more important than fixtures, and you've got to get rid. And ultimately, if you're in a position of strength, going from Watkins to Gyökeres long term will be the best case scenario. But even with that transfer, I still back Watkins more against Sunderland away, and also Villa's next fixtures compared to Gyökeres facing Man City at home and Newcastle away. You have not been able to predict Brian for over 1,000 years. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Next week, though, against Tottenham, I'd probably back you to win. I mean, that's just the way Brighton are, right? Very difficult. I think I said this last season, or the year before, there was one stage where Brighton had the exact same number of wins, draws, and losses over the last nearly 200 games or something. So, yeah, it's incredible. They're just very inconsistent, unfortunately. Easy says 40 points for Haaland in FPL Challenge. It's actually 52 once the bonus points are added in. So, yeah, it's an incredible score. Eddie says, would you wildcard out of the team? Got 60 points. Just scraped the green arrow, 6.8 million. Yeah, I talked about this before with you, Eddie. I don't think that's worth wildcarding just yet. I'm not saying you should never wildcard because it's a very important chip, but timing is so important. I think Gameweek 8 might be a better time to do it, or Gameweek 6, but I think Gameweek 5 is a bit awkward with some of the fixtures. Ala Madrid says, rate my team. Yeah, looking pretty solid. Rodgers is a bit of a concern at the moment, of course. I mean, I never expected him to be so poor. I'd say that's a 7 out of 10 because Saliba is still doubtful. He was in contention to play against Nottingham Forest, so he should be back this week. But against Man City, I think Arsenal will concede. Sanchez away to United, not the best pick. And Chelsea have only kept clean sheets in home matches so far this season. Van Dijk is fine. I think Richards is okay, but West Ham could still score there. Yeah, I'd probably say 7 out of 10. I like Ndoye potentially against Burnley. Erling Haaland is always a good option. This week, maybe a little bit less so against Arsenal, but he can still score. And Semenyo is fixture proof. So I'd say a 7 out of 10 for this week. Overall, it's a 8 out of 10 squad. Tell me what is wrong with my team. 45 points every week. Okay. Well, the problem is that you've got some good options in here, but they're just underperforming. Like Celso Murillo, for example. You also had that injury to the Brazilian, so we'll see if he's available against Burnley. Florian Wirtz has been a massive flop so far, but it is early days. I could see him scoring against Everton, but then again, I said this for the last 2 game weeks, he just hasn't performed yet. So, I don't see much wrong with it on paper. Obviously, Aït-Nouri is injured. You've got a double up in Burnley defence, which worked well in Game Week 2, but I think in most game weeks you'd rather avoid that, but ultimately that is not a priority for you. You need to focus on the Wirtzes and Watkinses of the world who are expensive and not offering enough value. So out of those two, I'd still say Wirtz is the priority to sell, but yeah, I could see both of them being on the chopping block for you in the next 2 to 3 game weeks. I think that is the biggest problem with your team, but it doesn't mean they were bad picks, just a bad outcome. Doku is one of the finest dribblers today in the Premier League. Many others do, but he doesn't dive like others do in the box. Today, his breaking the defence to set up that goal was classic. Yeah, Doku is one of the best dribblers around. The problem is the decision-making isn't there. His finishing is erratic. And yeah, he just doesn't make the right call sometimes in terms of when to pass, when to shoot, and the timing. But if he can fine-tune those details, I think he can become a top player. But it might just be a case of a very skillful, enjoyable player to watch who doesn't fulfill his full potential. Hallo says, what would you do with this team? Once again, it's not a bad one. A wildcard could improve that for sure. Long term it would. But I think timing is very important. I think what you probably do is sell Salah this week, try to go to Semenyo if possible, or a midfielder of that ilk, and then wildcard between game week 6 to 8, potentially. I think that might be the play, and you can introduce Haaland into your squad and stuff like that. Now, the problem, I think, and I understand this perspective and argument from people, they might want to triple captain Haaland in game week 6. So if you wildcard by that stage, you can't also triple captain. It's impossible to use 2 chips at the same time. So I get a lot of the different arguments flying around, and everyone's situation is different, but I look at a lot of these teams and I think they're well set up for game week 5, but it might need a wild card in future game weeks based on the fixtures. Thanks for the membership. It's been a good week with the freebie and a 45k with the bench boost used. Very well played homegrown FPL, and I'm glad that YouTube picked you because I click a button, then they just randomly allocate it. I believe if you're active in the chat without spamming, it does boost your chances to win a membership, and I do give 10 every single month. And a big shout out to Paredes and Napstars who also gift memberships from time to time. It is greatly appreciated. I don't hope Arsenal beat City 5-1. I hope it's 5-0. Oh yeah, for sure. Obviously 5-1 would still be incredible if Arsenal repeated that, but I think it'll be much closer this time. So yeah, 5-0, no Haaland, and any goal scored by someone low-owned coming on the bench. Or Gabriel, for me. But yeah, I probably gather you don't have Gabriel either. I had to decide Munoz or Lacroix transfer last game week. Long-term Lacroix was better for me, but I went with the exciting one. Well, Munoz will still get more points overall, and he is definitely the more exciting one. He'll get more goals and assists, but yeah, Lacroix will get fewer yellow cards. I think Munoz has always been a bit of a yellow card magnet. And yeah, DEFCON is definitely in Lacroix's favour. But the main reason I did that transfer was to give me enough funds to buy Semenyo for Salah, which I've done. I'm just saying it now. And yeah, I ultimately will discuss this in my team selection video, but some people might not be able to afford it now because of prices and stuff like that. Ultimately, though, I have to say this, I don't think copying is the way to go in terms of enjoyment and being a better FPL manager. And why copy me? I'm doing terribly right now. So you can always, you know, do better and not limit yourself to what someone else is doing. Predict who's the goal scorer. Is this the Arsenal City match? Let me know. Is the Kuiper a hold or sell? Well, Brighton's fixtures will turn around game week 10, I believe. I think he's been decent so far in terms of performances, but Brighton aren't keeping clean sheets. I'd probably sell him. But then again, if you got Wirtz or Watkins and these more expensive assets who are underperforming, they'd be bigger priorities to sell in the coming weeks. So it's all relative, right? But I'd say he's a sell. Spidey says, do you think Enzo or Caicedo could provide better value for money than Palmer? Yes, they definitely can. Palmer will get more points still and way more goal contributions. He's also someone you can captain besides the Haalands and Salahs of the world. But at the moment, Caicedo looks phenomenal in FPL. And if I was wildcarding, he would be one of the first names in the midfield for me. Josh says, hi, Dylan. Yeah, no worries about that, mate. I got 76 points, I think. I captained and bought in Semenyo. Nicely played. I could have bought Semenyo from -4 this week. But I looked at his record against Brighton and I thought I can just buy him for free against Newcastle. So yeah, a slight regret about not going for him, but very well played. And he is certainly fixture-proof this season. Now, he might not be on penalties if Cliver gets back into that starting 11, but that would be another string to his bow if he can get those penalties and take a few this season. Villa don't have Rashford and Asensio that help the team. That is true, but they weren't there in the first half of the season where Villa were decent still. And the year before that, Villa had their best league campaign in many years, and they didn't have Asensio or Rashford either. But I think the likes of Harvey Elliott will help them, but they aren't of the same quality. And yeah, when I say quality, it's more about the final third with the goals and the assists compared to Rashford and Asensio. For the first wildcard, in which game do you suggest? It's all team dependent, right? But check out my chip strategy guide. This is talked about as well. And what I'm going to do here actually is show you my chip strategy stuff here as well. So I'm going to let these slides play out. And a lot of these are discussed in my key changes to FPL video and the chip strategy podcast. So you can see double and blank game mix later in the season. And of course, that'll be referred to more as we get closer to that stage. And this is a breakdown of every single chip. So there are examples of when to use every single one as well. But I'm going to leave it at the summary. And there will be one for the first half of the season and then one for the second half, because ultimately we have 2 of each chip in this campaign. Okay, so this is what I've currently got kind of penciled in. So I do think I updated this triple captaincy one. So game week 6 is definitely an option on Erling Haaland against Burnley at home. Wildcarding game week 8 is what I've kind of talked about, and game week 11 is a rough idea to free hit. It can always be in game week 12 or even before that. A game week 8 free hit, for example, could still work quite well. And I've put the bench boost in game week 6. The main reason why is because we get 5 free transfers in game week 16, so you can essentially use those to maximize your bench boost squad and then, yeah, just have a really stacked squad while certain players like Salah go to AFCON. But to be honest with you, the way things are going, people might not even have Salah by that stage. They'll have Erling Haaland, so that might not work as well. But that's kind of a rough idea of the first half of the season. And for the second half, there is wildcarding in game week 32, bench boosting in game week 33, which would be a double game week, free hitting in blank game week 34, and triple captaining in game week 36. But we don't know which teams are doubling or blanking yet, so ultimately that is still subject to change. But that is going to be a very popular strategy in the second half of the season. Now, in terms of alternatives, this is what I wanted to show you as well. So as you can see here, triple captain in game week 6, 13, and 15, when Erling Haaland faces the newly promoted clubs at home in the first half of the season. With the wildcard, game week 4 was an option for some people, but I also earmarked game week 8 and 13, and I have to say game week 8 is the most likely for me personally. With the bench boost, game week 4 was an option, but there's also 17, 18, and 19 as well as alternative game weeks. To be honest, I did say this as well earlier, game week 8 could still be quite decent for some people with the bench boost too. And the free hit, I've kind of put a few there. Game week 4 and 6 are some options for you. And for the second half of the season, an alternative strategy would be to triple captain in double game week 33, free hit in blank game week 34, and then wildcard in 35, and then bench boost immediately afterwards in game week 36, if that proves to be the bigger double game week this season. But like I said, we'll talk more about that later in the campaign. But at the moment, if you're asking me, I triple captain Haaland against Burnley, and I'd look to wildcard in game week 8, for example. Now, some people might say, but one of the key reasons for me to wildcard is to buy Erling Haaland, so how can I triple captain him in 6 and then wildcard in 8? That's where you could maybe take the plunge and take a -4 in game week 6 and sell Salah that stage, or you might have enough free transfers and you can do it for free, to be fair. But yeah, you can't use 2 chips at the same time, so ultimately if you wildcard in 6, you can't triple captain Haaland in the same game week. Let's also go to some different screens. I think it is time to do that as well. And I'll talk about this in the next deadline stream on Saturday. The Wolves are top until game week 10, yet they're bottom of the Premier League table. Leeds United, Nottingham Forest, Spurs, and Man City are in the top 5 over the next 6 game weeks, and those near the bottom include Brentford, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, Fulham, and Everton. Even Liverpool are in the bottom 6 as well. With predicted points, Salah is still top, and Erling Haaland is 4th, but I think with Arsenal away, that is fair. In most other game weeks now, moving forward, I think Haaland would be number 1, but let's not forget, in game weeks 2 and 3, City lost those games, and Haaland never looked like scoring against Tottenham, for example. So that could still be a concern, and Salah could still end up being the better FPL asset. But as things stand, I think Haaland would take the lead, and he's also got better fixtures, as I showed you in the FDR. Watkins is 2nd. Yeah, that's why expected points isn't everything. I hope he can get 6 points or above and be the second highest scoring player in the game. That would surely be a much bigger score than that. Semenyo is 3rd, Bruno Fernandes is 5th, Palmer, Joao Pedro, Van Dijk, Ekitike, and Gyökeres are in the top 10. Let's now go to the price changes. So as things stand, Mateta, Van Dijk, Raya, Vicario, Cucurella, Haaland, and Kudus could all rise tonight. As for price falls, that includes Daniel Marlin, McNeil, Jorginho Rota, De Kuyper, Adingra, Harrison, Igor Jesus, Tierno Barry, Lewis Skelly, Wan-Bissaka, and I think pretty much all of them are sells, to be honest. Piru, Diouf, Buonanotte, Raul Jimenez, Bowen, Weiss, Ogochukwu, Awani, Neto, and then there's other options as well. Not all of them will go down in price, it's worth saying. Murillo is another one. He got DEFCON against Arsenal in the first 30 minutes, but had to be subbed off due to injury. I think for those that have him, he is still worth holding on to. Wait for more information. Ultimately, if he's missing, you could go to Lacroix or a Crystal Palace defender long-term as one particular example, then use those funds to buy Antoine Semenyo in the midfield, which is what I've done personally. So you can see the price changes and all of that. I'm going to put a link in the description. And with this website, you can also use it to see your rank right now before the FPL website updates. So be sure to check out livefpl.net and other websites like fpl.team. And speaking of which, this is the website. Very, very useful. I've used it for years, to be honest. And you can visualize future game weeks. So not just game week 5 like you can do in FPL, but also game week 6 here, for example. And it's very important in terms of visualizing things. So in my case, this is the plan. Sell Sarr to Semenyo. I'll talk about this in my team selection. I could take a -4 hit, and it might be another back 4 sort of week for me. So Chris Wood in for Ndai. That's what I'm looking at the moment. Maybe vice-captain Chris Wood. I mean, based on what Salah's done so far, captaining him might not be the best option, but yeah, he does need to play well to get points. We saw that today. And I'd put Reinders either 1st or 2nd on the bench. There is a case to start one of Ndai or Reinders over Gabriel. Ultimately, their ceilings would be higher. So that's something else I'll have to weigh up as well. But that's how things will likely look for Game Week 5 in my situation there. Let's go to the captaincy. Hopefully this works well. That's a bit Laylook. What is that? Anyway. You can see the top 10 captaincy options here. Haaland is the number 1 option. That definitely doesn't surprise me, actually. Those that are captaining him at the moment are flying in FPL. Joao Pedro is 2nd, Salah 3rd, Ekitike and Gyökeres complete the top 5. Gakpo, Mateta, Grealish, Semenyo, Enzo, Isak kind of represents a nice share of the pie. We don't have one option completely dominating. It is quite balanced at the moment, but I think in Game Week 6 that will change. Erling Haaland will be by far the most captained option in the top 10k. If we look at other kind of ranks like the top 100k, for example, well, no, apparently we don't even have the figures just yet. I'm not sure if that's a glitch. I think it is. Well, it is a glitch, clearly. So yeah, once that's updated, I can show you, but it might not be today. Let me show you FPL Challenge. I'm actually doing well in something. So it says 65 points on screen, but with bonus points added, that actually turns into 77. Oh, that was the wrong thing to do. Okay, let me do it here. So, 78 actually. So, yeah, Salah got the bonus point. I forgot about that. So it's 78 points in FPL Challenge. I'm going to update that very quickly. My only blank was from Mateta. I went for Munoz here. He got a yellow card, but a clean sheet as well against Sunderland. So 5 points. Alisson kept the clean sheet, standard stuff. Bruno Fernandes just played and got double points, of course. And that was the challenge last week. Any United or City players would have scored double the number of points. That's why Erling Haaland was always going to be my captain. Okay, so let me just update that to 78. I did forget about Salah's bonus point, to be honest. But yeah, 52 points from Haaland is incredible. He carried my FPL challenge team, but yeah, I would have rather he blanked, to be quite honest with you. That would have been a fantastic week for me in FPL. Okay, so that should be it. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think my computer's bugging out a little bit, so I'm gonna see if I can fix that. Okay, it's all fixed by itself. Let's go to the next set of questions. There are still a lot of messages coming in, so I'm gonna try go for every single one of them. But yeah, it is a mighty task, and for UCL Fantasy, it's going to be even more of an uphill battle with thousands of people tuning in. But it will be a pleasure nonetheless. Let me now go back to my FPL squad. I think that's all good. Next week, by the way, the challenge is called Red versus Blue. So any Liverpool or Everton players will score double the number of points. You'll see some of my initial picks in my team selection video and the final ones in the next deadline stream. Hi, Dylan, need advice. Scored 79 this week. Worried about my team. That's a good score, by the way. So I wouldn't be too worried from that perspective. So the Kuiper flagged, and also Saar. Borrell, Williams, Van der Ven, Wan-Bissaka in defence. Yeah, the biggest priority there is to sell Van der Ven. I don't think it makes much sense to sell Williams now when he faces Burnley and Sunderland. My attack is okay, but would you wildcard defence? No. No, I don't think so. I'm guessing you got Haaland, since you're quite happy with it. And ultimately, if you got Salah, I'd still keep him for Game Week 5. I would rank him higher than Haaland. That will change, of course, in Game Week 6. Yeah, your biggest priorities are Saar, De Kuiper, and Wan-Bissaka. Those three should be sold. If you've only got one free transfer, it depends on who you can go to. But Saar to Semenyo would be an absolute standout for me. And in the defence, you could go to a Crystal Palace defender for De Kuiper or Wan-Bissaka. I think both of them are clear sells, though. Musika Bogo says, finished on 72 points, free hit. Original team was 94. Made most of the right choices, just done over by Van der Ven and maybe a bad Cucurella pick. Yeah, it's still a good score in the free hit, but when you do lose out on 22 points, it is very frustrating, actually. So, yeah, I think that's a bit of bad luck against you as well. Most of us would have predicted West Ham to score, even if they lost the game. Wildcarded this week with 91 points. Yeah, that's very good. Like I said before, though, to other people, the wildcard is a long-term tool. Getting off to a great start with the wildcard is always a confidence booster, and it puts you in a great position, but it's about the long-term impact on your FPL team, and there are fixture swings in 6 and 8, and there are things to look out for that maybe could catch you off guard, so just be careful about that. But if you maintain 70-plus points in most weeks, you're going to be absolutely fine with the wildcard. Yeah, I have Watkins to maybe Rodgers to Semenyo. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, for those with Watkins and Rodgers, I think that sort of transfer would be most appealing to me. What attackers have for Liverpool? Probably Gakpo from Game Week 6, and don't underestimate Salah. He's still a good choice. Ekitike will still do fine, but I think Isak will have a clear impact on his minutes, and it could also have a certain influence on Gakpo's minutes at some stage, but he will be the clear starting left winger choice there for Liverpool, and I think Isak comes in for Ekitike in a couple of weeks' time, but it might even be after the next international break. Easy says 750k transfers for Isak in Game Week 4, 40,000 for Game Week 5. I think it's just the name. Also very expensive. Might be some Liverpool fans as well. I know a friend of mine, he bought in Isak already, even though Arne Slot was quite, clear that he's not going to start him anytime soon. Lacroix scoring against West Ham has never been more obvious. I don't think so, to be honest. I don't think he will. Probably Munoz. Do you have any video on a general chip strategy? Yes, as I mentioned before, I do. Check out my chip strategy guide from before Game Week 1. There are some different Game Weeks talked about. For example, a Game Week 1 bench boost was talked or discussed in that video. But yes, I have made a video on the chip strategy. And if people want to see it, I could do an updated one in the coming weeks. But obviously, there will be some very important game weeks coming up, like Game Week 6, for example, for the wildcard. Arsenal versus City next week is going to be the definition of when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Yeah, like Batman versus Joker in The Dark Knight. But yeah, Arsenal have had the better of City in recent years, but it's still going to be a very tough test. And yeah, it should be a very enjoyable game. I don't think it'll be a boring match to watch, nor do I think it'll be very high scoring, but it should be very interesting from a tactical perspective. I sold Watkins last night. I don't blame you whatsoever. Yeah, look, I talked about Spurs' fixtures a couple of minutes ago. They are in the top 3, I believe, in the FDR until Game Week 10. Only Wolves and Leeds United are ranked above them. The fixtures are great. When it comes to Game Week 10, that's when it turns for the worst, but yeah, I think it's worth having 1 or 2 Tottenham players. Start Rutter or Rodgers? I'm going to say Rodgers just about. No chance. I'm actually going to talk about Zubimendi in my transfer tips. Quality player. I think he could be very important for Arsenal and one of the best signings overall. But in FPL, I wouldn't go for him. Who's the captain next week? Salah doesn't look exciting in the game. From my team, it's between Salah and Chris Wood still. And to be honest, people might say, oh, if I had Haaland, I'd captain him. I disagree. Not against Arsenal away, who have the best defence. And I know Haaland scored against them in both games last season, but then there were, 3 or 4 consecutive games before that where Haaland had no chance at all against Arsenal. He didn't score a single goal. I don't think he even registered a shot in certain games. But yeah, Haaland is still a great option for the captaincy against anybody. But away from home against Arsenal, I prefer Salah facing Everton. Only gained 5 points on the wildcard. Yeah, not great, but as I've mentioned before, it's a long-term tour, and it's probably best reassessing this in a couple of weeks' time. Wood brace, hopefully. I think he could do that. And I said this before, he scored 2 goals against Burnley in his last meeting. Burnley to keep a clean sheet at home against Forest in Game Week 5. I'm going to say no. They can certainly do it, but I think Forest will score. Thank you, Aki. I appreciate it. Start Dubravka or Sanchez. Yeah, Linford, this will be talked about in my team selection. I've got both goalkeepers as well. I'm probably going to go for Sanchez, and I'd go for Porro. Meant to say my attack is okay besides Rodgers and Watkins. I have Dewsbury, Semenyo, and Sarr, Caicedo, Haaland, Pedro, Watkins. Dewsbury always fine as a backup option. Caicedo is doing brilliantly for you. The front 3 is also... well, I stopped myself there. Haaland and Pedro are looking really good. Watkins is a big letdown, of course. I don't think you need to wildcard that. And you've got Semenyo, who is the best midfielder right now. So my advice is to sell Sarr. I keep Watkins for another week. You can always wildcard in 6 to 8, basically, and change a few other players like Rodgers as well, for example. But yeah, as things stand, I'd sell Sarr. If you've got another free transfer at your disposal, maybe sell Rodgers. But I don't think you need to sell Watkins and Rodgers in the same week, because I think one of them will return in Game Week 5. But I've been saying this for a while now, and they are massive letdown. Any news on injuries? Not really. There's not much else to talk about with those players. I said with Murillo, Ange Postecoglou in his press conference said it was a knock, and he has to talk to the doctors, so we don't know anything. With Aït-Nouri, he's going to miss a couple of weeks, I believe. Let me double check that. I think it's at least 3 to 5 weeks, actually. And with Strand Larsen, I didn't see what Vitor Pereira said yesterday, but that will be significant as well. For those with Wissa, he's out for 4 to 5 weeks. Just bear that in mind. William Saliba should be available for Game Week 5. Even Bukayo Saka could be included in the next couple of weeks, but that all depends on how he progresses from his injury. So Aït-Nouri is injured until... okay, that's not updated there. Yeah, I think with Aït-Nouri, he's just a major doubt for the next couple of weeks, basically. So we don't know enough about that injury just yet, but I'll keep you updated if I see anything else on the matter. And hopefully we've got a Strand Larsen up there as well. Yeah, with Aït-Nouri, he just said that Aït-Nouri and Cherki were out for the Manchester Derby, which obviously we knew. But now he's orange flagged in FPL for the next game against Arsenal. Not sure if he'd start that game, to be fair. Maybe against Burnley in Game Week 6. With Strand Larsen, if I can quickly get that up there as well. So this was before the Newcastle game yesterday. Not in conditions for the game yet because the injury was a bit more serious and now he's trying to come back. We are hoping to have him available as soon as possible because he is an important player. So maybe by Game Week 5 or 6, both Aït-Nouri and Strand Larsen are back. But I thought I saw the Algerian left-back being out for even more time than that, but I'll have to double-check. Sunderland have had Burnley, Palace, West Ham, Brentford, so good fixtures, but they have played well. Is it really worth us keeping Watkins? Then there is Burnley, and they have been pretty good. Yeah, that's a great question, and Sunderland have had good fixtures, but they have capitalised on most of them, and the 3-0 win against West Ham was a statement. It was 0-0 until 70 minutes, but they ultimately turned it on. But yeah, I think they're definitely not a pushover. It's not like Sheffield United from a few years ago or Southampton last season, so they've got a genuine chance of staying up, but it is early days. Are you buying players based on form or fixtures? It's a combination of both, right? Certain players like Watkins, I mean, I keep saying this, look, in pre-season he had great form and Villa had great fixtures. I don't think it was a terrible pick, just a bad outcome. I think form is what I'm usually going for at the moment. So Lacroix has been returning in most games. I bought him in. Also to Fon Semenyo, who is another transfer for next week. I also bought Gabriel. He's been in incredible form for years now for Arsenal. So yeah, I think I'm buying players based on form. So in the case of Gabriel, for example, his fixtures aren't great. Yeah, I still bought him in. Which Arsenal assets should we invest in for the future easy fixtures? I think Gabriel, set and forget option. Arsenal have a lot of squad depth though, and they will rotate this season. Even Gabriel could have the occasional benching. I'm just warning you now, but he's less prone than Timber or the other options in that defensive line. So I'd say Gabriel, Saka when he's fit. Until then, I'd just say Gyökeres. So Gabriel and Gyökeres would be the ones for me. Based on what happened, the fixture not always guaranteed a big result. Connor Shopify says, I want to sell Cunha. Who would you recommend at 8 or below? Yeah, you've got Semenyo already, so that would have been the kind of no-brainer answer. I'd be very, very tempted to buy one of Caicedo or Xavi Simons. You've already got Kudus, to be fair, but I just think Caicedo will tick along in most game weeks. Thank you, Pratik. Thanks, mate. I'll hold on to my wildcard for now. I think that's the best thing to do. A lot of the teams I'm seeing are actually quite good on paper for Game Week 5. It might need a wildcard a little bit afterwards, but yeah, I think people are just jumping the gun if they are maybe struggling in the last week or two. Execute order, 66 points for me. Not too shabby. Yeah, nice one. Not a bad score to have, maybe. Just don't add another 6. I had Caicedo on my wildcard team for so long, ended up going king, so I could have Gyökeres. Well, at least Gyökeres scored, right? But yeah, Caicedo's been even better than I thought. I thought from the beginning he could score a lot of DEFCON, but the goals he's scoring on top of it means he's getting bonus points very easily. I think that will dry up, though, very soon. Could he still score 5 goals this season, get a few assists? Yeah, he certainly can, but he's not going to get 12 pointers in most weeks. It's going to be probably between 3 to 6 points from Caicedo very often. Do you have an FDR slide at all? I showed it earlier. Maybe I'll do it one more time, but ultimately in every single deadline stream I do the same thing. Got 84 points, however, gutted about Salah getting that pen. Well, just enjoy your points, mate. I mean, I was gutted about Erling Haaland scoring a brace and ruining what was otherwise a good week for me, but there was still a lot of frustrations like Watkins. Yeah, Walter Marder scored a goal from a header, actually, assisted by Murphy against Wolves. Got the maximum bonus points. He's a solid option, probably the most favourable from Newcastle offensively. He only played 64 minutes, though, and it's Bournemouth away and Arsenal at home in the next 2. So I wouldn't be buying him in just yet. He will be talked about in my transfer tips, but he's one to add to the watch list, that's for sure. What's your plan with Watkins? Probably to sell in Game Week 7 or 8, and that's arguably too late, to be honest, but I said this multiple times in the stream. Sarr is injured. Selling him to Semenyo is the priority. After that, I can focus on selling Watkins if he continues to disappoint. Gonna captain Watkins next game because Haaland is playing Arsenal. I'm not so sure if that's the best thing to do because Sunderland have won both home games so far. Villa haven't scored a single goal, let alone Watkins. So captaining a player from a team who haven't scored in 4 games, look, it could be investing in low stocks and seeing a massive return, but at the same time, I don't think captaining him is the way to go. Keeping him is probably the right play on paper, but I just wouldn't put the armband on Watkins. All these greedy people gutted about Salah when they smashed it. Yeah, I agree, but look, everyone always wants to find the advantage and extra edge over others. When Salah goes to AFCON, there are a lot of money in the bank. Yes, but as I mentioned before, people might not have Salah by that stage. They could have Erling Haaland instead and use up the money in other areas. Haaland captain saved my week. Nicely played, Timothy. I think Haaland was always one of the best options. Yes, Waldemar worth considering, but I wouldn't buy him just yet. Just Parky says we now have Potter at West Ham, Voldemort at... I thought I said it wrong. Voldemort at Newcastle, Cucurella, Hagrid at Chelsea, and Malfoy Garnacho at Chelsea. Who is Ron Weasley? That's a good question. I need to think about that. Would you swap... Not McAllister, no. Just because of the ginger beard. He's not technically ginger. I think Valentin Barker would have been perfect, but obviously he's not at Brighton. Yeah, good question. What about Hermione? Even though different genders on that. Lee says, would you swap Wirtz for Caicedo or Palmer going into Gameweek 5? Free transfer. Well, Palmer's upside is still far higher. Caicedo will give you better value and a lot of consistency for the price. There's no doubt about it. I think what ultimately determines this question, or the answer to the question, is what can you do with the extra money by going Caicedo? If you can also buy Haaland that way, I'd go for Caicedo. Otherwise, I'm still going to pick Palmer in most situations. Hey, Dylan got 73 points with Haaland captain, rise to 2 million, but my rank could have been higher. Yeah, look, like I said before, it was like Bruno Fernandes a few weeks ago. It's lucky when a player gets a last-minute penalty, but ultimately, the main appeal of these assets is the consistency, the multiple avenues to points. Penalty takers will always be, prioritized over others. Erling Haaland will have stinkers and still cover up with a penalty or a goal. Obviously, the Joao Pedro assist was quite lucky as well, but look, you've halved your rank, you got 73 points, you aced it with the captaincy. Just enjoy it. Just built my team for UCL Fantasy. We'll join your live stream back in 2 days with Arsenal, the early kickoff, if I'm not mistaken. Have a great day, Dylan. Catch up with you. Yes, Tuesday will be chaotic. I'll try my best to answer every single question. Just be patient, as most of you always are, and you will have your questions answered. Easy says top 3 flop FPL players and top 3 unexpected FPL players scoring big points. Yeah, I'd have to think about that, to be honest. I mean, 3 flop Premier League players so far. Wirtz would be one of them. It's early days still. He can still become a top player for Liverpool. Yeah, I need to think about this. So yeah, Wirtz will be top 3 flops at the moment. Yeah, Watkins. Watkins would be another one. Even Rodgers is in that conversation as well. So there you got 2 of them. Perkez, I think he's also a bit of a flop so far. Played okay against Arsenal, shaky against Bournemouth, subbed off early today, booked for simulation. So that's another option for you, I guess. Yeah, it's difficult to say. It's very early. 3 unexpected players that are doing so well. From an FPL perspective, Vicario would be one of them, to be fair. Senesi could be another one. Chalobah's another choice in the defence. In the midfield, I think Grealish would definitely be a standout there. Jadon Anthony has also been quite impressive. So yeah, those are some options there for you. I think that covers both questions in a decent way. So for those that haven't done so already, drop a like, subscribe. Let's try to get this to 200 likes overall. And on Tuesday, I'll be going live again for the first UCL Fantasy Deadline stream of the season. And the plan is to record a Transfers podcast, a wildcard squad, and a team selection video over the next week in preparation for the Gameweek 5 deadline, which will be next Saturday. Not going to check the link. My rank is too depressing. That link doesn't go to your rank, though. That goes to the prices, so don't worry about that. Thoughts on Kevin? He looked very sharp when he came on. He's very highly rated, actually, so I don't think it'll take very long for him to be the first choice left winger for Fulham. So, yeah, very, very impressive. Will you captain Watkins? No. No, I just mentioned that before as well. Are the captains for Game Week 5 or for 4? What I showed you with the predicted points was for Game Week 5, actually. Unless it didn't update. So we'll have a quick look again. So this is the FDR at the moment, for those that were asking, like Kevy. Bottom 6 includes Liverpool, actually. And the bottom, or the top 6 include Villa still, with Wolves top, Leeds second, Forest are third, and Tottenham are fourth. And City are in 5th. Even Arsenal creep up to 8th. Their fixture swing begins in Game Week 7. With predicted points, yes, it's for Game Week 5. You can see there it says Salah facing Everton at home. Watkins is second somehow. I don't agree with this, but that is the predicted points algorithm according to Fantasy Football Hub. And the price changes, I mean, not all of these will go down in price. I think that's a bit overstated, but yeah, we're going to see a few players rise. Even Mateta, yeah, he has been disappointing so far this season, but I still like him long term. And now it's actually changed a little bit. Only Vicario is going up in price, apparently. Okay, so that's changed. Aina and Watkins could go down in price tonight, apparently. So yeah, things have changed in the last hour or so, according to this algorithm. So check out the link I put in the live chat and let me know your thoughts as always. Just a recap on something I've actually done well in. FPL Challenge, 78 points. Salah 9-pointer, very lucky at the death. Bruno Fernandes, standard appearance points, and obviously you got the double based on participating, basically. You got a participation medal and points from the Classic Rivalry Challenge. Alisson with a clean sheet, Simon Munoz, who was booked, Mateta my only blanker, and Erling Haaland got me 52 points as my captain. I got 78 points in FPL Challenge, same here, mate. 77, says Pratic. Yeah, I think a lot of us captain Haaland. He was the obvious play with City players having double points. Yusuf says 97. Free hit because I had no Liverpool players. Big hitters, Semenyo, Haaland, Salah, Waltemada, Timber, Xavi Simons, Leno, punted on Pino and Madueke. Yeah, Madueke played very well and Pino should have scored. He had so many chances in that game, so a bit unfortunate with those two, but at least you had the luck of Salah and yeah, the others stepped up for you as well. Finished on 54 points, went for Mateta captain and went Salah over Haaland. Yeah, at least Salah got something for you in the end, but it was fortuitous. Surely this Villa run of form can't continue with these green fixtures on the horizon. Well, it can, as I said before as well. I think Villa will turn things around, and ultimately they didn't lose against Everton. They got a decent point away from home, but in the context of the season so far, no goals scored is embarrassing, and no one thought that would be the case, but I think Villa will click eventually. Had enough of Rodgers, gone for Semenyo, beat the price rise last night, not making the same mistakes as last year, holding and waiting doesn't work. It depends, mate, because look, I agree with you. Buying Semenyo for Rodgers is an upgrade. Even if Rodgers scores against Sunderland and Semenyo blanks, it's the right decision. But making early transfers, which I did also yesterday, and I beat the Semenyo price rise, it can result in injuries or suspensions happening in midweek with the Champions League and the Europa League and stuff like that. And in training, something else can happen. So having information is still the priority. But yeah, gaining a bit of team value and just making a decision, not overthinking, I completely get it and understand your perspective, but I think information is the most important, and the big risk with making early transfers is for injury or suspension to make things very complicated for your FPL team. Alan says bench Van der Ven, Gabriel or Kudus. I have Munoz, Virgil and Nico Williams. Probably Van der Ven, actually. I think Brighton will score, and whilst you could say the same about City, that's for sure, I think Kudus is the clear starter there. Caicedo seems like a guaranteed 4 or 5 points. Yeah, I agree. He might even get 12 like he did in Game Week 4. But yeah, even in UCL Fantasy, Caicedo will get plenty of ball recoveries as well. Avi says, I think I have too many starting defenders. Richards, Borro, Livramento, Senesi and Anderson. But of course, can't play all. Well, that's the downside if you're going for this sort of strategy of picking DEFCON players and you have no 4 million options like Reinildo on your bench. And to be honest, he has got 6 pointers on 2 occasions for me, and I haven't started him. But yeah, I get your concern. I think for Game Week 4, for example, sorry, for Game Week 5, I would probably start, I think, Borro, Senesi, and maybe Richards, actually. But yeah, next week, you've got a lot of options, but I don't think a lot of them stand out with their fixtures and clean sheet potential. But of course, some of them can get DEFCON. Current plan is to roll twice, Salah to Caicedo and Mateta or Joao Pedro to Haaland in Game Week 6. That's fine. I think that's the right call. Don't sell Salah for Haaland in Game Week 5. Do it in Game Week 6. That's my opinion. Hamid says, hi Dylan, hang on to Rodgers for one more week or swap to Xavi with excellent assist potential long term. Yeah, I definitely prefer Xavi Simons over the next 5. And, Spurs' fixtures turned for the worse in Game Week 10, but I still think Simons can do well in the tougher fixtures. Villa and Rodgers have been poor. I'd probably hold onto Rodgers for now. You've also got Simons playing in the Champions League against Villarreal. I'm not saying you can't go for Simons. He would be a consideration on the wild card, and he would be the preference over Rodgers, but I'd probably keep Rodgers for one more week in this case, and then maybe sell in Game Week 6. Hi Dylan, thanks for the great content again. Thank you very much. Very kind of you, and all the best of luck for Game Week 5. Anything on Jose Sa and Endo Lafay? Yeah, so I'll have a look at the injury updates on these players. I expected Lafay to play, actually, and obviously Jose Sa missed out, and it was Johnston in goal. I don't have an update on Jose Sa, to be honest, which is a bit annoying. It's quite difficult, I think, to get some of these updates, but probably in a couple of days I'll have one for you. Yeah, I'm not sure what was said. Yeah, so he was ill. Jose Sa is just ill. Ultimately, with goalkeepers, you don't want to make moves here, but Wolves are bottom of the league. I don't see them keeping clean sheets anytime soon. I would sell Jose Sa if possible. But yeah, he was in the squad, or he travelled with the team to Newcastle, but he was ill. So he should be available for Game Week 5. And the other one you asked about, Lafay. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, apparently got an injury in training. That's what I've seen here. Yeah, I need to double check that as well. But I was tipping Lafay to start after he scored in Game Week 3, of course. But yeah, the injury stopped him from doing so. I don't have any official quotes with me at the moment. I'll have another look now and see if I can find it quickly. But yeah, with Jose Sa, it's just an illness. He's back in Game Week 5. And with Lafay, don't see anything here. So yeah, we'll just have to wait for a few days and see what the manager says. What do you think of Cucurella against United and Dango Ouattara against Fulham? Will they start? Yeah, I think they'll start. I mean, Cucurella is the most nailed-on Chelsea defender, and in a big game on paper against United, he's not going to be benched, that's for sure. Dango Ouattara is the first-choice right winger. Fabio Carvalho obviously scored the late equaliser against Chelsea, so there's a slight doubt there in the back of your mind, but I think Dango could still start against Fulham. I'd be less convinced about him, though, compared to Cucurella. Your verdict on Wirtz, was he bad or Liverpool just ain't clicking right now? He played well against Arsenal. He also scored for Germany against Northern Ireland in the international break, but against Bournemouth, he was quite underwhelming. Against Newcastle, he was non-existent. And then I think against Burnley, he probably had his worst game, in my opinion. So overall, he has been very poor, but it is early days, and yeah, we can't judge too much yet, but I had high expectations for him to be a contender for Young Player of the Season and also be one of the contenders for signing of the season, and so far he's nowhere near it. Man United have the highest XG. Do you think we should pay attention to their attack? Mbeumo is my favourite alongside Bruno Fernandes. Yeah, I think Fernandes is number 1 and Mbeumo second right now. Cunha will only help them when he's back from injury. Sorry, bloody hell. That was annoying. Bloody hell. Yeah, Sesko wouldn't go near at the moment. His performances have been very poor. Yeah, for me, Bruno Fernandes will offer the consistency, but you could argue he's a bit overpriced at 9 million, and ultimately his only return came against Burnley from a penalty at the very end. You can also get DEFCON, but yeah, to be honest with you, the answer to your question is yes. I wouldn't be investing against Chelsea, though. Maybe Game Week 6 or 7 is the best time to invest in Man United. And obviously today they were quite poor. Their XG wasn't very high, actually. Man City dominated the game in general. But yeah, I think Bruno Fernandes or Mbeumo would be enough. I would not be going near Sesko right now. And Cunha is a sell or a skip, depending on if you have him or not. And I wouldn't be really rushing to get United assets at this moment in time. Yeah, Eze was quite average in the first half. I think he really stepped up in the second with that quick assist for Gyökeres in the first 60 seconds of the second half. Yeah, Eze will be a good option. Ultimately, I said this with Arsenal though, my favourite options are Gabriel and Gyökeres long term. Spidey says, I've got a double Forest defence, Sarr and Strand Larsen, Watkins and Gakpo Verts, Mateta Dorgu. I think just roll next week and hope for decent returns and wildcard to Haaland in Gameweek 6. Yeah, I think so. If you wildcard now, you'd probably get rid of your Forest defenders and they've got great clean sheet potential. Now, you could argue against Sunderland as well in Gameweek 6, it's the same thing with them actually, but yeah, Sarr, you could maybe sell this week anyway without the wild card. It's a great question. I think maybe in this case I'd be a little bit more conflicted because Strand Larsen, there's no guarantee he starts in Gameweek 5. But ultimately, I think it's probably worth wildcarding in 6 and getting Haaland there. Sarr is the priority sell though. Yeah, and Gyökeres is going to get popular in the next couple of weeks, in my opinion. Wanted him on the wild card. Think on the transition against City he could do well. Yeah, I'd be more confident about Gyökeres in Gameweek 5 against City compared to Newcastle away, because I think Eddie Howe will just have Newcastle sit back as he has done in the last couple of years, and Arsenal will struggle to score. Jubert says, who should I start out of these? Munoz, Cucurella, Porro, Van de Ven, and Esteve. Munoz, Porro, and Cucurella. Yeah, Matias, I'm not going to do it yet. That will be done in a couple of days' time in one of my videos. Probably the wildcard or team selection podcast, so stay tuned for that. And you'll see my final captaincy list in the deadline stream, but I don't have a captaincy list at the moment, no. I'd put Salah near the top. Erling Haaland won't be there, but for Gameweek 6, it's a different story, of course. Mateta to Isak, if we are sure he starts. Worth considering, but I don't see how that's going to be the case. I mean, if Isak comes off the bench against Atletico Madrid and scores and looks sharp, ready to go, then maybe, but I don't see Arne Slot giving that away before the Gameweek 5 deadline. So as things stand, I'd be saying no. Just wait a little bit longer on Isak. Top 5 players for a wildcard. Long term, it'd be Haaland. Not a big fan of him against Arsenal, of course, but it would be him. I'd say Gabriel. Caicedo. Oh, well, before Caicedo, I'd say Semenyo, to be honest. I think Semenyo is a great option. So those 3 would stand out. I still like Palace defenders like Munoz or Lacroix. I'm not sure if they're in the top 5, though. So, yeah, just to reiterate, it'll be Haaland, Semenyo, Gabriel, João Pedro, and to put a 5th option in there. Yeah, I think the 5th standout might be... Yeah, let's say one of Lacroix or Senesi. It's just someone who gets defensive contributions regularly, relatively cheap as well. And they can also get plenty of clean sheets in the process. Seth van der Berg could be one of the Weasley twins. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Fred or George. Start Senesi or Goodmanson. Senesi. Live FPL says I've got 0 clones. Surely my FPL team sucks. Yeah, not necessarily. Yeah, I always have a few clones. I mean, that's kind of natural given that I make videos and do live streams. But yeah, whenever I see very few clones or 0, I'm quite happy with that. So look, it's still early days. Don't think too much about the rank. Obviously, you want to do well from the get-go. This is my worst start to any season, so I need to get things going very soon. Walter is 6'7". Newcastle have advantage of headers. I know Walter scored against Wolves from a header, but that's not his main strength, actually. It's probably his hold-up play and his movement. Good finisher as well. But yeah, of course, from a height perspective, they've got 2 giants, but they're not necessarily the best in the air, in my opinion. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Time for Watkins to go. Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, it's definitely the case that he's going to be a sell very soon. But look, in my situation, I'm going to keep him. Semenyo in for Sarr is the priority. Going into Gameweek 6 or 7, you look, Watkins' time is coming to an end at my team, but I'm probably going to keep him for another week at least. Watkins, Verts, and Sesko top 3 flops so far. Yeah, I think that's a fair list. Sesko's another one. He is a younger player as well. He has potential, but he just hasn't been doing it so far. Even though it's tempting to wildcard, says Dan the Man, I'm going to be patient and stick to the plan. I think that is the way to go. What's your take on Bitcoin as an inflation hedge? Is that like a bot comment? I'm not sure. Hopefully you're not a bot. Jose says, for Gameweek 5, which one should I bench? Murillo, Porro, Richards, and Van Dijk? Probably Richards. There's a chance Murillo misses out anyway, so you have no decision to make on that front. But yeah, if Murillo's fit, I'd play him. Do you think going with an Arsenal defender and Raya in goal is worth it after 7? Yes, but with Arsenal, they're fixture-proof anyway, so they can keep a clean sheet against one of Newcastle or City and then lose against West Ham. They've done it before over the years, but the answer is yes, it's worth it. Who is the best captain for Gameweek 5? Salah's up there for me. He has been poor. Very lucky return this week. You could argue all his returns have been lucky so far this season, but yeah, I think Salah, Chris Wood would be up there. Ollie Watkins, dare I say, is top 10, but I just don't have the confidence to captain him right now. Haaland would be ranked a little bit lower than usual, facing Arsenal away, but he's still a consideration. Maybe Palmer away to United could be quite underrated as well. But yeah, as I said before, in a couple of days' time, I'll be compiling a top 10 captaincy list. But before I even do that, I'll be doing a team selection video for UCL Fantasy tomorrow with a updated captaincy list for UCL Fantasy there. I'll also be doing a deadline stream on Tuesday for the Champions League. There's also going to be a transfer tips podcast in FPL, highlighting 11 players to buy, hold, sell, and skip. Then I'll be getting to the wildcard squads and the team selections with top 10 captaincy options considered. Sell Salah to Haaland in Gameweek 6, not now. Salah goes to AFCON, will get the owners, have a lot of money in the bank. Yes, for those that own Mohamed Salah, yeah. The background sponsor Coca-Cola, yes it is. Avi says, honestly, I want to bench Bruno for next game week so I can play 4 defenders like I said earlier. I get that, but on the other hand, Fernandez's ceiling is much higher. He can get bonus points, a penalty. He's still on set pieces like free kicks and corners. And from open play, he can still score or assist when he's on it. So I don't know which defenders you're talking about, but I still think it's worth starting Bruno Fernandes. Thoughts on Xavi Simons, or is Pape Sarr the better pick? I still prefer Xavi Simons. He's a talented player with a lot of potential. I know Sarr is also decent, but yeah, Simons will get more goal contributions. Sarr is good for DEFCON, but there's no doubt about Simons' minutes. I think there will be with Sarr in the long term. Dylan, how many teams are playing in Europe? Well, there's 5 in the Champions League. There's also 2 in the Europa League and also 1 in the conference, which is Crystal Palace, controversially. So that's 8 teams there. Would love for Strand Larsen to be ready for Gameweek 5, but looks unlikely. Things change very quickly, though. If Strand Larsen trains well in the next couple of days, he could be thrown straight in there. But as things stand, you are right. I'm at 180k rank at the moment. What are your tips for maintaining a high rank and improving it? Well, I was at that sort of rank at this stage last season after a relatively decent start, but basically it all went downhill between game week 3 to 8, actually. So yeah, I think the most important thing is to not chop and change and just follow the crowd. So I think a lot of people will just say, sell Salah, go to Haaland this week. I think try to, be calm and patient with your assets. And even someone like Salah still scored 9 points this week, although very luckily, of course. Yeah, so I think the best thing to do is not follow the crowd, keep doing what you're doing, and be very patient with your assets. Obviously, some players like Wirtz and Watkins have to return soon, otherwise they're clear sells. And to be honest, I talked about selling Wirtz a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, I think the best thing to do is stay calm and keep doing what you're doing, and don't be influenced by outside sources or follow what other people are doing. Easy says, what's the next couple of themes for FPL Challenge right now? It's basically just going to be derbies. So next week it's Everton versus Liverpool. Those players will score double the number of points. Thank you, Dan the Man. Very much appreciated, and hopefully I can continue to offer constructive advice. Let Isak start and maybe his top 5 too. I agree. But even if he does, the minutes will probably be insecure. I think he'd get 60, 70 minutes as a starter. And to be honest with you, yeah, I'm not so sure about that being the case. Arne Slot was very complimentary about the Swedish manager, about easing Isak in. And he said they'll do the same thing. He wasn't in the squad today. He'll probably get a few minutes against Atletico Madrid. I think it'll just be a case of sharing minutes with Ekitike from the bench. Jubit says, which midfielder should I play? I'd probably start Brennan Johnson. There's no guarantee he starts, to be honest, but I think what would actually help you there is seeing the lineup against Villarreal in midweek. If Brennan Johnson doesn't start on Tuesday, I'd be very confident about him starting in the Premier League next week. So I'd start Salah, Semenyo, Brennan Johnson, and probably Elliot Anderson at the moment. The thing with Anderson, though, is his main appeal is DEFCON. He's going to get that more consistently in tougher games like Arsenal away, as opposed to Burnley away. But of course, his chance of scoring or assisting will be much higher. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of your other three midfielders, to be honest. Maybe Harvey Elliott has the highest ceiling this week, but I'd certainly start Salah, Semenyo and Johnson, albeit long-term, Brennan is a sell. Mohamed G.A. says, who is a must-sell? Elanga, I think, is probably the clearest sell of the lot. He does face Nottingham Forest very soon, and he could start one of the upcoming games, maybe like Arsenal to hit them on the break, but yeah, if Johnson gets 2 out of 3 starts coming up, I'd be very keen on him, actually. But he's ultimately a sell long-term, and I think sells and Wood are sellable from Game Week 7 onwards. So right now, the priority for you, Mohamed, is Elanga, in my opinion. James123 says, which 4 should I start out of Borro, Munoz, Senesi, Gabriel, and Williams? Yeah, I would start Williams, based on the fixture. I'd also go for Borro, multiple avenues to points, and also Munoz. You also said 4, so it's between Gabriel or Senesi. I lean towards Senesi. He's scored DEFCON in every single game so far this season. I think both Bournemouth and Arsenal don't have a great chance of a clean sheet this week. I'd say Arsenal's maybe a little bit higher, but that's debatable. I'd start Senesi and bench Gabriel. Kevin Schade was super impressive against Chelsea. Very attacking and dangerous throw-ins. I wonder if those count as assists if they go in. Yes, I believe they do count as an assist. Schade was impressive against Chelsea. I don't think he'll be on penalties, even though he's only missed 1. It was a terrible one. Might not be enough to have him off them penalties. What am I, Jamaican? Okay, I don't know what I'm saying right now. Anyway, the Jamaicans are now unsubscribing and everything. I should have done the accent. Anyway, yeah, Kevin Schade. I don't really think he's going to be consistent enough. And ultimately, for a similar price, just go for Semenyo. That's the way I look at it. You've also got Xavi Simons for a little bit cheaper. Actually, no, sorry, same price, 7 million. Yeah, those two would be the priority. And Caicedo at 5.5, soon to be 5.6, is the way to go. And big up Jamaica. Good luck, Dan the Man, says Twisted Parky. Johnny, whoa, nice name. Hi, Dylan. Possible Dewsbury Hall replacements. Who would you prefer, Caicedo or Zubimendi? Look, I think Zubimendi's a brilliant player. He's going to be very important for Arsenal this season. But in FPL, it's no contest. Caicedo is going to get DEFCON very consistently. Zubimendi won't. Both of them won't score many goals. I think Caicedo would have the edge there as well, though. It's Caicedo for me. And do you think Lucas Bergvall could be a differential? Look, he's a young player. He has potential. But that was his first Premier League goal for Spurs against West Ham. It was a great header. I wouldn't be going for Bergvall. The best Spurs midfielder is Xavi Simons, followed by Kudus, then Pape Matar Sarr, who's arguably better than Kudus right now, to be fair. But I think all 3 of them are better than Bergvall. And with your other question, as I said before, Caicedo all day long. Yeah, Patra, sorry to say this, but I did show slides and I highlighted this earlier. There's also a chip strategy guide on my channel. So just watch that video and rewind the stream and you'll see my answers to that. So basically with mine, I'm quite flexible with the chip strategy. A rough kind of week to wildcard is Game Week 8. And I'm quite open-minded about the other chips. If I buy Erling Haaland in the next week or 2, I'll triple captain him against Burnley at home in 6. Otherwise, I'll wait until Game Week 13 or 15 when he plays the other newly promoted clubs at home. Then with the bench boost and free hit, I'm quite open-minded about them, but I talk about possible game weeks to use them in that chip strategy video. Pratik says, who is a bigger problem, Nico Williams or Juff? Definitely Juff for me. He's got more attacking threat, but Williams has a far better chance of a clean sheet against Burnley and Sunderland. Also, your best pick for a 4.5 goalkeeper. As I said at the beginning of the season, Petrovic. I think that is quite clear now. The problem with Petrovic, though, is that for 0.1 million more, You can cover Bournemouth defensively with Senesi, who will give you 2 to 4 points as a minimum, and he can score 8 to 10 points with Defcon and a clean sheet combined. So, yeah, Petrovic is my favourite 4.5 keeper. Coca-Cola in the bin for me these days. I rarely drink it, to be honest. But it goes well with rum. Yes. Good evening, Dylan. Are we all forced to bring in Semenyo at this point? I want to say forced, because you got Caicedo at a cheaper price point. You've also got Xavi Simons if you want to go a little bit differential. But I think Semenyo is one of the clear standout midfielders. He's going to be very consistent, a no-brainer pick. He's on penalties when Kluivert isn't on the pitch. So from that perspective, I think Semenyo is a very easy transfer to make. It's a bit boring, I know, but I bought him in for Saar before the price rise yesterday. And that was always my plan, which I talked about in my previous team selection after buying Lacroix for Murillo. Watkins owners, if they keep, deserve a hat-trick. Or a brace. I mean, even that doesn't make up for the previous game weeks, but I'd take that right now, obviously. I mean, even a goal would be a cause for celebration, but it's still not enough to undo the pain. Munoz or Lacroix for next week. It's still going to be Munoz, in my opinion. It's probably a fixture where Palace might be more on the ball than they usually would have against the likes of Liverpool, Arsenal, etc. Maybe West Ham will sit back a little bit in that game and try to hit Palace on the counter-attack. So Lacroix, look, I'm not saying he can't get Defcon, he certainly can, but I think Munoz will be the more exciting pick in this given game week, and he's got more chance of scoring or assisting. Aranya says 85 points, Haaland, Semenyo and Van de Ven coming in clutch. My first big game week score in FPL this season. I'm yet to get one, so fair play on getting 85 points, and having those three is very important, and it's quite clear that Haaland is the better pick over Salah right now. That could still change, but for game week 5, I wouldn't be selling Salah to Haaland, as I've told many people, but obviously if you got Haaland, you're not going to sell him. He is quite clearly a purchase, which I talked about in my Transfers podcast last week. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you mean there, Easy. What percentage of teams play in Europe affecting EPL, FPL in terms of fitness? Like I said, 8 teams are playing in Europe. It's going to affect some teams more than others. With Chelsea last season, for example, they could easily rotate until the final in the Conference League and still go far in that competition. It might be a little bit different with Palace, of course. They'll go strong in both competitions. So yeah, 8 out of 20 teams are affected in the Premier League, and it will affect them greatly, especially those in the Champions League where they have to go strong, otherwise they're out. Just Parky says, I usually start really well but fall away. Yeah, I usually start very strongly. Then I fall away between game week 3 to 8, so I just need to get going again, but at least I got a green arrow with Erling Haaland going off. I'm really considering Watkins' captaincy, but it would really help me get back on track. It would be a massive differential, and it might be controversial, but I think Watkins will feature in my top 10 captaincy list, but very low down in that list, to be honest, and it's mainly a fixtures play. Picking Isak for next week's FPL challenge is a no-brainer, right? Not necessarily. He might not even start the game. I mean, there's nothing to lose. I mean, the thing with FPL challenge, you can see the lineup. So if he's in that team, yeah, go for him. But unless, look, if he's on the bench, he's still worth consideration, but I don't think he's a no-brainer. Would you captain Haaland or Watkins? In Game Week 5, look, Haaland is quite clearly the better pick. It's just Arsenal away, which puts me off, but yeah, at this moment in time, it's probably Haaland. Both of them wouldn't be in my top 3, I believe. Not for Game Week 5. I really thought Arsenal for the league, now between them and Paul, could be so close. To be honest with you, Liverpool have won every single game. They're finding different ways to win, arguably, or against different types of opponents, but they have left it late in every single match. So despite the results, I look at the performances and I think Liverpool were far better last season. And let's not forget, by this stage last season, they lost to Forest in the first 4 or 5 game weeks. So, look, Liverpool are the favourites to win the league. They made the big signing of Isak and Wirtz. So, from that perspective, they would be the favourites for me personally. Arsenal would be the second favourites. But, yeah, in terms of what I've seen so far with the performances, I think there's not much in it between Arsenal and Liverpool. If anything, Arsenal's squad depth would be a massive advantage for the Gunners. You know, against Forest, there was no Saka, no Saliba. Odegaard got injured early on. Saliba, what was the other one? Oh yeah, Rice was on the bench and given a rest for the Champions League, and yet they still won 3-0 and played a very strong team. I don't think Liverpool have the same depth, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, Liverpool will be right up there. If you finish above Liverpool this season, you will win the league. That's the way I look at it. So it's early days. I'd like to think Arsenal win it. They have to, based on what they've done in the last couple of years and the squad they have, but it won't be easy. Is that all you have to choose, Haaland or Watkins? Even Chris Wood, despite the recent disappointments, would be a genuine consideration for me. Start Goodmanson, Senesi, or Reinders, or Dewsbury Hall? Probably Senesi for me. Yeah, I think 75 points is good, Ansari. It's a decent score. What do you think of free hit for Gameweek 5? Team dependent, but it could work for a lot of people. I mentioned it in my chip strategy slides earlier in this stream. I don't know why the FDR rates Everton, home, easy for Liverpool in the next game week. It's going to be a 1-1-ish derby. The thing is, though, Liverpool typically win at Anfield against Everton. So in terms of the scoreline, I think it will be very close. I agree with you, but yeah, I think Liverpool will win it. I think Liverpool will win against Everton. Maybe just like 2-1, 1-0. But yeah, I think they'll find another way in that fixture. I have Salah, Wirtz and Dye, Reinders, Gameweek 5 not looking good. I'm in a similar position, but I've got Gakpo instead of Wirtz, which might look a little bit better on paper, but yeah. You make a good point overall. I just think Liverpool will win the game and score 2 goals. That'll be my prediction. Thoughts on selling Mateta and bringing in Pedro ahead of Gameweek 5? I wouldn't sell Mateta against West Ham. Let's not forget, the Hammers have been hammered on multiple occasions against Tottenham, 3-0. Sunderland 3-0, 5-1 at home against Chelsea, and Mateta has a decent record against them, if I'm not mistaken. Got 7 points, Semenyo, Haaland, Captain, Van der Ven, Porro, Caicedo. Yeah, if you've got all those players, you're cooking this week. And also made attackers with 10 DEFCON more easy since they're more attacking than defending. Yeah, I think I know what you're saying there. Yeah, defenders only have to get 10 defensive actions to score DEFCON, whilst midfielders and attackers or forwards need to get 12 defensive actions. Is it time to get rid of Reinders? There might be bigger priorities elsewhere, to be fair, but he's benchable against Arsenal. This could just be the fixture where he returns. FPL is completely unpredictable at times. The same goes for the Premier League, but yeah, I still think Reinders will have some big scores here and there, and it'll be quite difficult to foresee them, but yeah, he has been a disappointment ever since that opening game week against Wolves. If Murillo is doubtful on Friday for this game week, but it looks like a short-term injury, would you sell or keep it for game week 6? Probably sell and use it as an excuse to go for a long-term option like Gabriel, or downgrade and use those funds to buy Semenyo or Haaland in other positions. Have you seen the tinkering in Brentford versus Chelsea to allow Palmer 1 extra bonus point? Well, that's always going to be the case, right? And if you have a game taking place at the very end of the game week, you won't have that sort of luxury of bonus points being altered or DEFCON also being updated according to the Opta stats. So that's the problem with FPL at the moment. You do have an imbalance where games on the Saturday will have points being tinkered with until the end of the game week, and that won't be the case with the last given game in the match day. But yeah, I didn't see that Palmer was given an extra bonus point. How nailed do we think Xavi Simons is? He'll start most games for Spurs, but look, is he going to start every single game? Not necessarily. You've also got the Champions League. The Carabao Cup starts soon, although I think he'll be benched in those games instead. And I think another competition, obviously, in a few months' time for them will be the FA Cup in January. But yeah, Xavi Simons should start most games for Tottenham Hotspur. Brennan Johnson is the bigger concern. Fall away between Gameweek 3 to 8. I was meaning like after 25. Yeah, I was talking about myself. I know in your situation, like last season, you started very well and then fell off around that sort of period you're talking about. I used to be wary of Watkins because he was hot and cold, then so good last year when I didn't have him. I'll be honest, Watkins has been an absolute nightmare for me over the years, and when I don't have him, he's brilliant. When I own him, he's terrible. It's just how it is. Would you go as far to say Caicedo is set and forget for the whole season? Yes, it does block you from triple Chelsea, and at one stage you might want Joao Pedro, Palmer and Cucurella or Sanchez. That's the only downside to Caicedo, but yeah, if you're happy with that, I think he is a very good option at that price, probably the best in the midfield. And Sari says, is Saka a must anymore or any other Arsenal mids could work? well, he's not even fit or available. And Madueke is doing very well in his absence, albeit not getting any goals or assists just yet. I already have Gyökeres and Gabriel. I'm thinking of getting Saka in the next game week or the week after. Assuming that he's back very soon, then yeah, I think buying Saka in early could be a massive differential. But to be honest, as an Arsenal fan, I don't want to see Saka rush back in. Just have Madueke play there for now and have Saka eased into things because he's too important and there are some big games coming up. I know obviously you want him for the Man City and Newcastle matches, but it might not be possible. Thinking about a Wolves player to replace Salah, I wouldn't be going for a Wolves player. I know they're top of the FDR, but they're bottom of the Premier League. And which midfielder do you even go to? Arias, Menezes? I think there are better options elsewhere, like Semenyo, Caicedo, and other options discussed in my wildcard videos and today. Yeah, I was asked about Eze earlier. I think he'll be a decent FPL option, but for Arsenal, I'd be prioritising Gabriel in the defensive line and Gyökeres up front in the midfield. I just mentioned players just now like Semenyo. I think they are better choices in general. Based on performances so far, Arsenal are way better than Liverpool right now. I wouldn't say way better, but yeah, look, Liverpool have scored in every single game. Obviously, against Burnley and Arsenal, they only scored one goal. Arsenal failed to score in that big clash in Game Week 3. But I think that game was a 0-0, and it was decided by one moment of quality, a great free kick by Szoboszlai. Arsenal are more solid defensively than Liverpool, so that's a massive advantage for them. More squad depth, and they've also scored more goals, I believe. Liverpool scored 4 against Bournemouth, which obviously helped them, 3 against Newcastle. So yeah, they've both scored 9 goals, but ultimately Liverpool have struggled in the last 2 game weeks to create chances and score. However, being a Liverpool fan, I'm happy if we click, but don't do it early, like we did last season when we beat Real Madrid. Like I mentioned before, I just think with Liverpool, their performances last season were very sustainable from the get-go. And despite the 1-0 loss against Forest, you could see that they were going to be a serious contender for the title. And I said before the beginning of last season, I thought th'd be top of the league by Game Week 8 because they had the best fixtures, but I didn't think they'd sustain that. And for Arsenal to get so many injuries, and ultimately, I think Liverpool deserve to win the league anyway. So yeah, it should be an interesting season. Hopefully, it's going to be very close. I think Arsenal were never really in it in the last campaign. But yeah, Arsenal just have to have a bit of better luck with injuries, I guess. But they've got the squad depth now to compensate if Saka, Odegaard, Saliba miss out, like we saw in Game Week 4. Rapid says, who would you captain? Sanchez, Borja, Williams, Munoz, Gakpo, Semenyo, Dewsbury Hall, Rodgers, Watkins, Haaland, Pedro. I'd seriously consider Semenyo as a captaincy option. And with Gakpo being at home, I know Everton are tough. I think Gakpo could be an underrated captaincy shout as well. So it's between those two, Joao Pedro and Haaland for the captaincy. Yeah, over the coming days, I'll make a list and fully decide on my top 10. But I think all of them could be in it, actually. On current form, you'd captain Semenyo. I would lean towards Cody Gakpo for the fixture. Is Josh King still a decent option at 4.5? Yeah, he's a decent option, but you've also got Caicedo for 1 million more. But for that price, you're not going to better Josh King in terms of minutes and also the potential of the player. He could get less minutes over time. We could see Iwobi, for example, being moved into a central area and maybe Fulham go to a 4-3-3 to accommodate Kevin as the left winger. So there are possibilities for rotation there, but Josh King at 4.5 looks pretty enticing, and he is the first choice attacking midfielder right now. I really want Caicedo, but Game Week 5 just doesn't feel like a great entry point. But United away, he's going to get many defensive actions and score DEFCON, I think, so he can still give you 4 to 5 points. Second Air says, actually, Dylan, it's my first season and I have too many big players facing each other in Game Week 5, City, Arsenal, Newcastle, so I want to know when is the best time to use the free hit. Well, I don't know the rest of your squad, but I get your perspective there to want to use the free hit. And I said this earlier, Game Week 5 could be quite underrated in terms of this chip. So, yeah, that's definitely a consideration for you, but it's difficult for me to say without knowing your team. Which two should I start between Reinders, Elliott, Anderson, Wood and Watkins? Unpopular maybe, but I'm going to say Wood and Watkins. They've got the fixtures, and I think Chris Wood is right up there for the captaincy. The plan is to do Salah to Saka and Mateta to Haaland in Game Week 6. I like those transfers, to be fair, assuming that Saka is available by then. Who is the best captain in Game Week 5? It is. This is probably the most difficult week for the captaincy that I've seen. Some options that spring to mind include Salah at home to Everton. He's probably number one for me based on his record against the Toffees at home. I think Liverpool could win 1 or 2-0 and Salah gets a goal and an assist. So he's probably my first pick, actually, despite his poor performances. Ryan Winter says, thinking of going for a 3-4-3 next week and bringing in Isak, but managers are unpredictable. Well, Arne Slot was quite clear from his press conference that he's going to ease Alexander Isak into things. I don't think Isak will start. You know, based on what we saw today, he wasn't even on the bench. For Sweden, he didn't start a single match as well. His fitness isn't up to par right now. So, yeah, I think Isak won't start against Everton. So buying him in Game Week 5 seems premature. I will not sell Salah in my team. Aina is a sell after this game week. Yes, Salah could be available for the Liverpool game, but look, in my situation, I think it's quite clear that buying Semenyo for him is the best course of action. It might vary for some people, and yeah, Aina's out for multiple months, so it might be different for you. So that is a fair take, I think. Ansari says, so do you think only Gyökeres and Gabriel are enough for Arsenal for now? Well, yes, because they face City and Newcastle over the next two, and whilst Arsenal could win both games, my feeling right now is that they will drop points in one of those matches, and Newcastle is the more likely one. They've struggled at St James's Park recently. Look, in terms of Arsenal mids, Eze will be the most consistent for goal contributions right now until Saka's back. I think Madueke looks really impressive, but he's not getting any goals or assists at the moment. And Zubimendi, quality player, he's not going to score very often, despite the brace he scored against Forest. So ultimately, Gyökeres and Gabriel's enough, in my opinion. Maybe you double up on the defence with Raya. That could be another way of doing it if you want to triple up. Thank you, Pratik. I appreciate it. Lager says Rodgers or Ndai to Semenyo. Long term, I'd rather keep Ndai. It's an awkward one, though, because this week I'd start Rodgers over Ndai. Yeah, it's a difficult one. If you really want Semenyo this week, which I don't blame you, I've already bought him in, I'd probably sell Rodgers thinking about the long term. Caicedo not going to the next international break. He got suspended. Not necessarily, mate, because that was for the World Cup qualifiers. The next set of games are international friendlies for Ecuador, and Caicedo will miss the first game of the World Cup in matchday 1 next summer. So that's actually not the case. Good for his fitness and not travelling far. Hate to break it to you, mate, but that is not going to be the situation. Yeah, Van der Ven on the bench. Not really a bad play, though. Against West Ham, I thought the Hammers would score. And for him to score on top of it, yeah, that was probably aided quite significantly by the Soucek red card. Should I play Van der Ven or Anderson? I think Spurs will concede here. I know I said this last week, but I also talked about this against Bournemouth, and at least I got it right once. I'm going to say Anderson. The problem with Anderson, which I said before, he's going to get DEFCON in the more difficult fixtures like Arsenal away, and against Burnley, whilst the chance of scoring or assisting are higher, the chance of DEFCON will be significantly lower there. Thank you, Secondary. Much appreciated as well. Easy says, if Salah keeps the last-minute drama goal, our FPL manager's not considering him as a top captaincy every game week. Well, he is considered a top captaincy option anyway. You triple captain him, for example, on your first team. I captain him. A lot of people are putting the armband on him, but obviously those near the top 100k or top 10k are going for Haaland, and they're getting more points in the process. But look, for me, in Game Week 5, Salah is the clear standout. Maybe clear is not the right word, but I think he's number one. For Game Week 6, I think that shifts, and Erling Haaland is by far and away the best captaincy option there. Henry says bench one of Nico Williams, Anderson, Senesi or Porro. Yeah, I get that. I'd still be less keen on benching Porro compared to Van der Ven, despite what we saw this week, because generally speaking, Porro will get more goals and assists than Van der Ven. Yeah, Nico Williams is the clear starter for me. I'd arguably bench Anderson, actually, but yeah, that's because Senesi can get DEFCON, so he can give you 3 or 4 points at a minimum, it looks like. So it's between Porro or Anderson to start. And yeah, once again, it comes to Anderson. I think he might be better in the more difficult games, actually. So tough call for you, but I'd definitely start Nico Williams. No doubt about that. And maybe Senesi. All right, considering if Saka is fit, I'll stick to my Salah to Saka, Mateta to Haaland Game Week 6. Yeah, and that's why it's a reaction stream. We're giving our initial thoughts. It looks like Saka could be available for the City or Newcastle games, but They would be rushing him back, I believe, and there's no need if Madueke continues to play that well. All we need for Madueke now is goals and assists. And Sari says, thinking of starting a five at the back, Gabriel, Munoz, Van Dijk? Yeah, sorry, I get confused between him and Van der Ven now. Goodmanson and Mukiele. Not so sure about Mukiele. I think Aston Villa will score for what it's worth. The rest, fair enough, looks pretty decent. Yeah, Gabriel, Munoz, Van Dijk, I mean, I'm just wondering what your alternatives are in the midfield and forward line. In my case, I'm looking at a back four and benching Reinders and Indai and going for Joao Pedro, Wood, and Haaland. Sorry, I wish I had Haaland. That would be amazing. Yeah, Wood, Watkins, and Joao Pedro in my front line. So yeah, I understand your temptation to do that. I'm just less convinced about Goodmanson and Mukiele, and obviously Gabriel's facing City. On 91 points, let's go. Fair play, green, extra green. That's certainly a green arrow for you. No worries, LFC fan, and enjoy the rest of your weekend, and also the best of luck for Gameweek 5, and for UCL Fantasy if you play it. Mod says, my biggest mistake was selling Haaland in Gameweek 4 and 5. Yeah, if you saw my Transfers podcast last week, I talked about buying Haaland and talking about the shift from Salah to Haaland that will be talked about in the coming weeks. I wouldn't do it in Gameweek 5 now, so if you want Haaland back, do it in Gameweek 6. It's definitely not worth selling Salah or a hit in Gameweek 5. Yeah, Pape Matar is decent, but his minutes could be a concern long term, and my favourite Tottenham midfielder would be Xavi Simons. Do you feel like a 5 defender meta is going to arrive? It's possible, but I think a back 4 is probably the meta right now. A 4-4-2 or even a 4-3-3 is looking more likely. So you're looking at a midfield 4 of Semenyo, Gakpo, Caicedo, and then one more. Then you're going for a front 3 potentially. But yeah, I think 4-3-3 might be the meta very soon, or a 4-4-2, which is what I'm doing in most weeks right now. I think it's back-to-back game weeks where I've done it. And next week, my current plan is to go for that same formation again, 4-4-2. Salah's not involved so much this season. Well, we saw this trend from the back end of last season as well, from February up until the end. But until January, Salah was unstoppable. Loving Fantasy Football says 37 points, absolutely fuming. I want to do Ekitike and Bruno to Haaland and Reinders. I don't suggest that. Buying Haaland is the right idea. And if you want to buy Haaland, I'd suggest Caicedo instead of Reinders right now. But do it in Gameweek 6. Don't sell Ekitike and Bruno in Gameweek 5, in my opinion. I think that duo could outscore Haaland and Reinders, personally. Verts to Semenyo is probably the standout transfer, in my opinion, mate. I'd do that first. Then you could consider buying Haaland in Gameweek 6. Eddie says, would you bench boost Dubravka, Nuri, Dewsbury Hall, Estev? No. Dubravka has Forest at home, which isn't terrible, but yeah, it's not exactly something I'd want to bench boost. You've also got Estev, so a double up in the Burnley defence. Dewsbury Hall is facing Liverpool away, and Nuri is orange flagged. He might not even start against Arsenal, which is a tough fixture anyway. My answer is no. You have a better bench in the coming weeks. Anish says, I'm going to bench boost in Gameweek 5. Just want to bring in Eze. Well, let me know what your bench is, Anish. Maybe we'll talk about this in the deadline stream. I will be wrapping up now. But yeah, different strategies flying around. It's great to see. But just because your bench might look very good this week, it's not the case for others as well. For example, in my case, I'm not going to bench boost in the next week or two. This Gameweek 4, I thought having Ekitike and Gakpo was better than having Salah alone. Once again, it comes down to that late penalty, a bit fortuitous, but it ultimately was the correct decision. And that's why Salah is worth the big bucks. He can play poorly and walk away with goals and assists. Mukiele hit DEFCON back-to-back games, and my options are starting two from Mukiele, Goodmanson, King, Dewsbury Hall, and Verts. I'd still start Verts over most of them. I know he's been poor, but he's not going to continue blanking every single week. Ultimately, he is a sell, but if you're keeping Verts, I wouldn't be benching him for Mukiele and Goodmanson. You do make a good case about Mukiele, and DEFCON is very important. Maybe between Mukiele and Goodmanson, I'd favour Mukiele right now. So thank you, everyone. That will wrap up another extensive live stream. And yeah, every single week, the plan is to do reaction streams and give our initial thoughts going into the next game week, of course. And Gameweek 5 is all done and dusted. Now it's time to look ahead to match day 6. Match day 6? Gameweek 4 is done and dusted. Whatever. You know what I'm saying. Match day 5 is next on the agenda. But first and foremost, UCL Fantasy will take precedence, and I will be going live on Tuesday for the first deadline stream of the Champions League campaign, and I will be doing a team selection video. That will be out tomorrow. You can watch my chip strategy guide for UCL Fantasy. That was uploaded on Friday, and all my drafts, including my latest one, which was uploaded today. Kvaratskhelia was injured. He was subbed off after 30 minutes, so that will be a change on my team selection video. And Lamine Yamal will likely miss the Newcastle fixture. That will all be discussed in my UCL Fantasy content. And the aim will be to get to 36,000 subscribers by the Tuesday deadline stream, where so many of you will tune in. The same goes for my team selection podcast in the Champions League as well. For Fantasy Premier League, you still have a lot to look forward to. The transfer tips over the coming days, although it might be a little later than usual, with UCL Fantasy being the main priority for the next day or two. And there will also be the wildcard squad for Gameweek 5, where Erling Haaland will be a big talking point. And my team selection. I have made a transfer already, and I have sold Ismail Assar in the process, which I talked about in this reaction stream as well. And there might even be an additional FPL podcast, like a free hit squad or another predicted lineups video, but those won't be happening every single week, which I've talked about very recently. And next Saturday will be the next FPL deadline stream, so stay tuned for that. Thank you to everyone who was tuning in today. It has been a pleasure. And if you have any other questions, leave them in the comment section or join my Discord server and put your comments there. You can also reach me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Thank you, Pratik. Very kind of you. And the same goes to Connor Shopify. Latest Twister Parky. Always good to see you. Will Burnley park the bus against City? Yes, but I think City will score way more goals than Liverpool did today. Erling Haaland as well, for example, has a great record against Burnley. He scored a hat-trick against them. I think it was a 6-0 win in the FA Cup when Vincent Kompany was the manager. I know it's different circumstances now, but yeah, I think City would still win by 2 goals minimum. I'd still back them to win by 3 or 4, actually. Yeah, of course, Burnley will park. And there's also a big difference between playing at Turf Moor compared to the Etihad. So I think City with the home advantage will take full advantage. Claudette says, cheers, Dylan. Good to see you here again as well, Claudette. All right, Dylan, see you then. Thanks. Thank you very much. Twisted Parky says, buses. Yes. Not just one, probably 2. I will not bench this right now with 2 of my players injured. For which team though, Easy? Your first or second team? Oh dear. Ansari says, my plan could change and I might just get Verts out, but that prevents me from getting Haaland though, and would make me keep Salah, but Haaland is really tempting and Salah is looking rather underwhelming. I get that. Look, every situation is different. If people have to wildcard now, I would just buy in Erling Haaland and save that transfer that we would probably make in Gameweek 6. But for most people, I think it's best to just roll with what you have right now, use a free transfer if needed, and keep Salah for Gameweek 5 and switch to Haaland in Gameweek 6, whether that's for a wild card with free transfers or a -4 hit. It's all team dependent, but I think that's the best play at this moment in time. And I'll talk about this in my future podcast as well. Sia Lager as well, a long-time viewer of the channel, and a massive thanks to all the members, patrons, and subscribers. I'll see you very soon for more UCL Fantasy and FPL content. Stay tuned for that Tuesday deadline stream. That's going to be a blast for UCL Fantasy, and so many of you will join. I'll see you then.